Maple Drizzle Murder, a Millie Pepper Mystery, Book 1. Written by Rosie A. Point. Narrated by Abigail Reno. Chapter 1. It's unheard of. A travesty. My grandmother, Cecilia Pepper, sat on the edge of her seat at the coffee bar in the Starlight Café. Why, the sheriff ought to be ashamed of himself. How are we meant to walk down the streets in this town with this threat in the back of our minds, looming like some giant sword of Damocles over our heads? She tapped the newspaper, a copy of the Starlight Gazette she'd laid on the coffee bar the minute she'd sat down. My grandmother was the definition of dynamite in a small package. At 75 years old, she was brimming with vigor to make up for her height. I'm sure Sheriff Rogers will figure it out. I fixed Gran a cup of coffee, a hazelnut latte with extra cream, and placed it in front of her. It's a small town, Gran. They'll catch whoever's doing this. A small town that's going downhill quickly. My grandmother glanced around as if she was afraid of someone overhearing our conversation. But the painful truth was, there was nobody in my cafe this morning, just like there'd been nobody in it the day before. As I'd learned quickly, folks in Star Lake, Iowa were insular. They didn't care that my late father, a town favorite, had left me the cafe. I hadn't lived in town long enough for them to trust me. And then there was the fact that I had absolutely no experience in the hospitality industry. Not now. Just take a breath and smile. I mean, really, a mugger? Here. Nancy from the bakery told me her sister's best friend's cousin was attacked, wallet stolen. Can you believe that? If I didn't love the lake and the people so much, my grandmother continued, lifting the latte, I'd move away in a heartbeat. Gran, I'm serious. Gran, you've lived here for 35 years. Fine. I might not move, but I'll protest this at the next town council meeting. You can mark my words on that. Gran took a sip of her latte, pressed her lips together, and fluttered her eyelashes. Nearly as good as your father used to make. A silence ensued, filled with our shared sorrow. It was too soon to talk about him. I cast my gaze away from Gran and studied the interior of the cafe. Light streamed through the windows and the glass front doors, illuminating the linoleum that was in need of a revamp, as well as the checked tablecloths and laminated menus. The chairs were comfortable and well-worn. The cash register was an antique, and the walls were dark wood. Overall, the aesthetic was typical of my dad's taste, hastily thrown together, but with plenty of heart. This is really good. Gran must have noticed the lump in my throat. Metaphorically, of course. You know, you'll make a fine restaurant owner. As fine an owner as you would have made a detective. That was another touchy subject. Thanks, Gran. I forced a smile. She reached over and patted my forearm. Movement outside on the brick-paved sidewalk caught my attention. A homeless woman, wearing a shabby coat and carrying several plastic bags, walked up and took a seat outside the cafe. Oh dear, Gran said. Do you know her? Only by sight, Gran replied. She's new to town, I think, but I'm not familiar with her story, poor woman. I bit down on my lip, then headed back to the coffee machine and started fixing another latte. Much to my surprise, the bell over the door tinkled, and Sheriff Rogers entered. He was in his late 50s, with a gray mustache, balding, and wearing his uniform with pride. He sauntered over to the bar and eyed me. Morning. Good morning, Sheriff, I said. What can I get for you today? The sheriff didn't immediately answer me. He scanned the interior of the cafe, then pointed over to a new section I'd set up, with the help of my cook, Francesca. What's that? That's the waffle station, I said, smiling. Do you want to try it out? We prepare the waffles fresh, bring them out to you, and then you decorate them as you see fit. There's ice cream and maple syrup. That wasn't here when Frank was running the place. No, I said. No, it wasn't. I figured that people would enjoy Waffles? Sheriff Rogers, my grandmother said, and the sheriff jumped a little. Celia? He sniffed, using Gran's nickname. Shoot, I didn't see you there. And he sounded truly regretful, like he was anticipating a volley of complaints. He wouldn't have been wrong in that respect. What's this I hear about a mugger? Gran tapped the newspaper. A mugger in our midst? Well, yeah, there have been reports of muggings over the past week, but I assure you it's under control. Now, Sheriff, you know better than to shovel that level of manure around me, Gran said. I want answers, and I want them now. What am I supposed to tell the ladies in my book club? That we can't walk to the library in peace? I assure you. The conversation faded out as I finished off the latte, grabbed a cupcake from the display of about a dozen under the glass counter, and walked out into the sunlight. It was the end of summer, the weather a temperate 70 degrees with a soft breeze brushing down the street. I stopped in front of the homeless woman. Good morning, I said. She glared at me, her skin tan and her ire obvious. What do you want, Red? The urge to brush my fingers through my red hair nearly overtook me. Thankfully, my hands were full. Let me guess. You want me to move? It's a free country. No, I said. I just wanted to check if you were okay. Okay? Yeah. I handed her the coffee and the cupcake. You need anything? It was my experience, after working as a beat cop in the city, that everyone had a story, just like everyone had a purpose. Sometimes life just got in the way. The woman blinked. Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Sure, just holler if you need a glass of water or something, I said. I'll be inside. The woman, still full of mistrust, nodded, then took a sip of her coffee. I headed back into the cafe and found Gran and Sheriff Rogers embroiled in their argument. Muggers on the street. If you think that will stand for this, then you're delusional. You know, I can call up the heads of the 3 factions right now and get them to arrange a meeting. Sheriff Rogers, blustery as he was, paled at that. The factions, as they were called, were the 3 unions that pretty much ran Star Lake. There were the boaters, the butchers, and the bakers, and they frequently disagreed on issues, to the point where the town was practically split into 3. It was expected that you'd fall into line with one of the groups even if you weren't an active member of said union. The bakers would be most interested to hear about your lack of action when it comes to crime on our streets. I mean, this whole area is packed with bakeries and restaurants. This is bound to affect tourism too, and then the boaters will get antsy. The summer months in Star Lake were famed for their fun boating activities, from tours on the lake to fishing to jet skiing and recreational activities. You're complaining about mugging and crime on the street, Sheriff Rogers said, finding his voice. Yet you won't stop your granddaughter over here from feeding said criminals. Gran jerked back as if she'd been slapped. A strange effect on a tiny woman in a floral print dress. Feeding them? I think the heat is getting to you, Sheriff. She just took out a coffee and a cupcake to... He trailed off and gestured toward the homeless woman, now sitting on a bench out front. And so? Gran grew red and rose from her bar stool, trying to tower at 4 feet 8 inches. The sheriff tugged on his collar. All I'm saying is that if you don't want trouble, don't invite it into your home. And with that, he swept from the cafe, trailing his overbearing, spicy cologne. Idiot, Gran muttered. Gran, there's no love lost between us. She resumed her seat, and for good reason. But she didn't go into the reason. I fixed a cup of coffee for Francesca, who was in the kitchen, patiently awaiting orders that would likely never come, and then joined my grandmother at the counter. Gran paged through the newspaper, stopping on an image and tapping it. See? Now this is why you don't want to get on the wrong side of those boaters. Look at that. A full-page ad for their Boating Blowout 2021. I read over her shoulder. Join us for a boating extravaganza as we celebrate the end of summer. You're going, I assume? Everyone's going, Gran said. Everybody who's anybody. It will be a great opportunity for you to network, dear. It's been a year, and you've only made one friend. Thanks, Gran. I'm just saying, she replied, that it might be a good opportunity for you to get out there and meet someone. Meet someone? The only person I'm interested in meeting is an accountant who can help me manage my finances for this place. Things were not looking good, and I was not about to let down my father's legacy by losing the Starlight Café. I'm sure there are plenty of eligible accountants around. Not what I meant, Gran. She gave me a sneaky smile, and it cheered me up. I couldn't stay mad at Gran. Are you coming by tonight for supper? Gran asked. I'm making chicken casserole. You can bring Waffle along. That sounds great. It sure beat eating a microwave dinner over the kitchen sink. Chapter 2. The day wore on in the Starlight Café, giving me plenty of time to contemplate the lack of customers and how much my life had changed in the blink of an eye. 1 second, I'd been a cop, a few weeks from taking my detective's test. Next, I'd been in Star Lake, mourning for my father. Fate had something in store for me. I just wasn't sure what it was. I entered the kitchen through the silver swinging doors. I don't think we're going to get anyone in here for lunch, I sighed. Francesca, overweight, her hair tucked neatly beneath a hairnet, smiled. That's okay, Miss Pepper, she said. I'm sure things will pick up once folks get used to you. Poor Fran looked so professional in her chef's whites, surrounded by the steel countertops. The gas burner was new, one I'd had installed with the last bit of my savings, while the walk-in refrigerator made strange noises on occasion, a legacy from my father's time running the place. I appreciate your optimism, I said, and tried to share it. I think we'll close for today. I checked my watch. It was just past 1 p.m. But we'll open at the same time tomorrow. Sure. Listen, I asked my auntie to come by and try the place out. She's definitely going to eat here tomorrow morning. And when she tells everyone how great this place is, you'll have a line around the block. Thanks, Fran. She was a star, and so kind about how new I was at running a place like this, the last part of my dad that I had left, apart from my tiny house. I helped Fran clean the nearly spotless kitchen, then closed the Starlight Café and headed off down the road. I'd promised I'd meet my best friend Sue at the nail salon. Just Nails was located 2 blocks over and was full of life and women laughing hysterically as they gossiped. The interior was decorated in red crushed velvet, and my kitten heels clicked on the white tiles. A hush settled over the gathered nail technicians and women upon my entrance. Sue waved at me from the back of the room. Yoo-hoo! Over here, Millie! The chatter resumed as I headed deeper into the salon. Into the belly of the beast? Sue grinned at me, flashing perfectly white teeth, then gestured at a salon assistant to drag a chair over. I sat beside her as a tech pushed back Sue's cuticles with an unnatural amount of excitement. Millie, you've got to get your nails done here, Sue said right away. Trinity is amazing. Look at my hand. It's like I've been reborn. Trinity laughed, tossing back dark curly hair over her shoulder. Sue rearranged her braids with her free hand. I mean, I never thought red was my color, but look at them. I took Sue's hand and admired her nails. They're gorgeous, I said. But then, what isn't gorgeous on you, Sue? Flattery is music to my ears. She retracted her hand. Now, how are you? What's happening at the cafe? Nothing, I replied. Absolutely nothing. Aw, don't say that, Sue said. Listen, it'll pick up. People have to get used to you. Besides, I'm going to bring over a friend tomorrow. Have some dinner. For whatever reason, people in Star Lake referred to lunch as dinner and dinner as supper. Confusing. Thanks, I said. Fran's an amazing cook. I don't want her talents to be wasted, you know? Sure. And I think you'll like the friend I'm bringing over, too. He's new in town like you. Sue wriggled her dark eyebrows at me. Don't start, Sue. Start what? She asked innocently, but she broke right away. Oh, come on, Millie. You've got to get out more. And it's not normal for a 30-year-old woman to stay home every night eating reheated meals with her pet bunny. You have a pet bunny? The tech Trinity asked. I nodded. Are you going to keep it or eat it? I looked at her in abject horror. Eat it? Sure, Trinity said. My grandma's got a great recipe for rabbit stew. Thankfully, the nail salon's door opened and another woman entered. Again, the hush fell as the ladies turned to study the newcomer. Good to know it wasn't just me then. Recognition sparked, and I waved at the newcomer instinctively. It was my neighbor, Angela Sampson. Both Trinity and Sue hissed at me, but it was too late. Angela, her stringy blonde hair bouncing as she walked, made her way over to us. Oh, hello, Millie, she said, removing a compact from her purse and holding it up to check her makeup. Angela was a local, born and raised, though she'd only recently moved into the small house next door to mine. Hi, Angela, I said. How are you today? Fine. Just waiting for my nail appointment. I stopped by that Starlight Café of yours, she said. But it was closed? Yeah, we closed early today, I said, cursing the fact that I'd missed out on even one customer. But we'll be open again tomorrow, all the way up to 5 p.m., so you feel free to stop by. We're serving waffles all day long. Waffles? Angela pulled a face. Look at me, Millie. Does it look like I eat carbs? Angela was, to her credit, rake thin. You don't become a celebrity by packing on the pounds. A celebrity? I asked. Again, Trinity and Sue gave a combined hiss, sort of like a pair of deflating balloons. Angela didn't notice. Yeah, of course. Wait a second, you don't know? Angela clicked her fingers at a salon assistant and demanded a bottle of spring water, chilled. Tell me you know about my commercial. Angela didn't wait for me to ask further questions. A detective's dream witness. I starred in the Tasty Bites commercial in '99, when I was 9 years old. Ever since then, I've been getting nonstop calls from Hollywood asking me to star in movies. But of course I've turned them down. There's nothing quite like small-town living. Besides, I've got a new business venture to consider. Sue rolled her eyes so hard her eyelashes fluttered. Angela glared at her. Is there something wrong with your eyes? You should get them checked out. She moved off to take her place at a nail station. What I should do is call my therapist after that conversation, Sue muttered. She's the one who needs a therapist, Trinity put in. That's rich coming from someone who eats innocent bunny rabbits. I cleared my throat. Sorry about calling her over. I had no idea. It had been a knee-jerk reaction to seeing a familiar face. Angela and I had barely shared a conversation, though I knew about her habits from peeking out of my curtains. The conversation drifted, and I said goodbye to Sue, leaving her to chatter and prepare herself for date night with her husband. She had the perfect life. A husband, 2 perfect little girls, a pet cat, and a thriving career as one of Star Lake's only therapists. Life couldn't get any better for Sue, and I was ashamed to admit that I was more than a little envious. I strolled down the sidewalk with its decorative lamps, flanked by cutesy boutiques with decorative awnings. Star Lake was the perfect tourist attraction. A quiet town with plenty to do out in the wilderness, a museum that showed the history of the town, and gorgeous surroundings. It was a nice town. I just hadn't expected to wind up here with a failing cafe to fix and a completely different future to the one I'd planned out. There has to be something I can do about the cafe. I'd already asked the bank for another loan, but that was out of the question. If I could find a way to invigorate the cafe, draw in interest, maybe hold an event like the one the boaters planned on, I smacked into a broad chest. Whoa there. The chest was matched by a deep voice. I looked up and lost my breath. 2 sparkling blue eyes captured mine. He was tall and tan, with dark hair and a slightly crooked nose. Handsome in that too handsome to be real way. "Meet to pleased you," I said, then swallowed. "Are you for real, Millie?" This guy was probably a tourist with a wife and 3 kids. What was wrong with me? "Meet to pleased you too," he replied, laughing. "Are you good?" "I'm fine, thank you. Sorry." And then I rushed past him as fast as I could. The last thing I needed was more complications. And men were more complicated than murder cases most of the time. Chapter 3. That night. She said, "What?" Gran pressed a hand to her chest, then glanced over at Waffle, my adorable pet bunny. He'd laid himself out on a cushion in the living room of her cabin with a view of the lake and deck through the sliding glass doors. Waffle dozed, his cute nose occasionally shifting while he drifted in and out of sleep. He'd eaten 2 small carrots as a treat and had retired, toffee-colored fur and all, while we chatted over our chicken casserole in the open-plan kitchen. She said that her grandmother had a recipe for rabbit stew. I whispered the last part so it wouldn't wake poor Waffle. What a horrible thing to say. Gran shifted in her chair, her empty plate pushed to one side. If she'd said it in front of me, I'd have walloped her over the head. As much as I'd like to go around hitting people, I am trying to make a good impression in town, for the cafe. Honey, you need to save your efforts for when they're better spent. The people in town will come around. There's not much you can do to encourage them to like you. It's just time. Well, I've talked about this like 5 times today, I said. Let's change the topic. All right. I heard you're going to meet a new man tomorrow. Sue called me and said she's bringing a newcomer to your cafe. Some handsome chef or the other. Apparently he's to die for. Handsome as they come. Not the type of subject change I had in mind, I said, and got up from the table. I collected our plates and started washing the dishes. I liked helping Gran, even though she insisted she didn't need the help. Tell me about your artwork. What are you working on? Gran spent a lot of her time in the attic painting, and she never let anyone up there to see her work. Gran gave a most unladylike snort, and Waffle flicked his long ears in the living room. You need a man in your life, Millie. I most definitely do not. Face it, Gran said. You're not going to wind up becoming a big city detective like you wanted. And you've already said that you don't want to get involved in law enforcement in Star Lake. That leaves your bunny and the cafe. And I'm pretty sure, honey, that your daddy didn't want you to waste away in the Starlight Café. I didn't answer. He'd want you to live a full and happy life, Gran said. He probably left you the cafe so you could sell it, not run it. Well, I'm never going to sell it. The words tumbled out, hot and fast. Never. Gran didn't comment. Again, a silence separated us. Unspoken sadness. Well, Gran said. Well, I just don't want you to feel obligated. And I do want what's best for you, honey. You know that, right? I dried my hands on a kitchen towel and went over to her. I gave her a hug, inhaling the soft scent of her rose perfume. I know, Gran. The conversation petered off. I finished the dishes, had some pop while we watched Shark Week reruns, and then put on Waffle's lead, bidding my grandmother good night. The sun had begun its slow descent at 7:30 p.m., and Waffle and I took a stroll along the lakefront road from my grandmother's cabin toward the adjoining streets. The smell of the water, the distant sound of 2 children laughing as they played in their front yard, brought a smile to my lips. 20 minutes later, we arrived in Juniper Avenue, the tiny road that was flanked by comically small wooden houses, each painted in bright colors. My father had chosen this road and left me the duck's egg blue house where Waffle and I now lived. We had a single bedroom, bathroom, and open-plan kitchen and living area, with a small front yard bordered by a picket fence. It was cozy and quaint, and more than enough for us. The purple of dusk had set in, and I carried Waffle. I always picked him up when he got tired, the last of the walk up to the front of the house. A shout sounded, and we stopped in front of the gate, Waffle's ears perking up. "You heard that too, right?" Waffle turned his head, the fluffy tufts on the ends of his ears tickling the underside of my chin. Another shout, and then a bang. It had come from the pink house to the right of mine, Angela's place. Angela didn't usually have company, unless it was her boyfriend, an equally thin guy with a wispy beard. I listened, intrigued by the disturbance, and for a second I was back in the city, the scent of smog in my nose and the prospect of danger behind the door. How many times had I arrived at the scene of domestic dispute? "Bother!" Angela yelled, her voice drifting out of an open window. "What a dumb idea!" A man's voice replied, the tone soothing yet muffled. I listened, but the conversation continued without the thumping and shouting. They had worked it out, whatever it was. "Okay," I said, kissing Waffle on the white patch on his forehead. "Time for a snack before bed and a show. What do you say? Tomorrow's a big day. I'm supposed to have a lot of customers at the cafe." A lot was a relative term, but I'd take anything more than 0 at this point. Chapter 4. I was up bright and early the next morning, hoping for a better day. I gave Waffle his usual breakfast of lettuce, carrots, and bunny food, then let him out into the front yard to hop around while I got ready for the day. Waffle spent most of his time outdoors during the day in his bunny hutch, but he was free to hop around. I'd reinforced the base of the fencing with chicken wire in case he made a bid for freedom, but so far he hadn't done anything like that. He liked Starlight. Or maybe he liked me. I figured it was a combination of the two. I arrived at the Starlight Café at 6:30 a.m., well before any of the other stores on the street had opened, and let myself in. The kitchen was quiet. Fran wouldn't come in until about 8 a.m., so I set to work doing prep work. I wasn't a chef, but Fran had taught me a few basics so that if I ever wanted to help in the kitchen, I knew what to do. Besides, I enjoyed baking the cupcakes and preparing the waffles, my minimal area of expertise when it came to baking and cooking. At 7 a.m., the bell above the door in the cafe tinkled. I frowned. That couldn't be Fran. "Who's there?" I called. "We're not open yet." "It's Angela," the cereal commercial superstar called back. "I came for my coffee. Trust me, I need it this morning. You will not believe what just happened to me." "Sure, just give me a sec." I was streaked in frosting, so I removed my apron and headed over to the kitchen sink to wash up. The bell tinkled a second time. Another customer? "Angela?" I called. No answer. She must have left. I washed my hands and dried them, then switched on the dishwasher. The hum didn't disguise the tinkling of the bell a third time. What was going on out there? Was I suddenly flush with customers? Never a bad thing, given the current state of business, but this was highly unusual. "Angela, is that you?" Still no answer. I'd figured she'd slipped out and come back again for whatever reason. I exited the swinging kitchen doors. "We've got waffles and—" The words evaporated from my lips, and my brain freeze-framed. A millisecond later, my thoughts and senses came back to life. Angela lay on the chipped linoleum in front of the waffle station. A bottle of maple syrup had been rammed into her open mouth. She had been stabbed in the chest and her eyes were blank. Dead. "You don't know that. Check her pulse." I went through the motions of bending beside her, even though I knew that she was gone. I scanned her body, documenting mentally out of habit. Her nails were chipped, even though she'd had them done at the salon yesterday. She wore a pair of scuffed, dirty sneakers, though Angela was definitely a stiletto girl. My guess was that the stab wound had killed her, rather than the bottle of maple syrup. Facts flew through my head across a backdrop of fear. Angela was dead. In the cafe. Why? How? The perpetrator must have come in, murdered her, then left again. But how? I hadn't heard anything. Or not enough of anything. Call 911. That was all I could do. I wasn't a police officer anymore, and even if I had been, I wouldn't have had the jurisdiction to do anything about this. I reached for my phone in the pocket of my jeans, and the bell above the door rang. I froze, lifting my gaze, expecting it to be the murderer. Fran stood on the threshold, white as a sheet. Her jaw dropped. What's going on? Someone killed Angela, I said. I'm calling 911. Fran stared first at me, then at the body. She's dead? Yes, I said. You'd better sit down outside, Fran. They're going to want to close us for a while. I remained calm, removed the phone from my pocket at last, and dialed 911. If I'd thought life couldn't get any more complicated, I'd been wrong. Chapter 5. An hour later, I sat in a small gray room at the Broome County Sheriff's Office, a bottle of water on the table in front of me. I folded my arms, occasionally catching a glimpse of my reflection in the windows flanking the room. My red hair was in total disarray, my cheeks flushed, eyes wild. I couldn't have cared less at this point. Angela had been murdered in my father's cafe. Your cafe. And Fran had told the sheriff and his deputy the truth, that she'd found me crouched over Angela's body. Naturally, they were interested in what I had to say, but I'd been waiting over 30 minutes now, and each passing moment sent another thrill through my chest. On one hand, I wanted nothing more than to figure out who'd done this. Being a detective had been my calling, my unfulfilled calling. On the other, I'd put that life behind me, and I didn't want to go back to it and find out what I was missing out on. The door opened and Deputy Barker entered the room. He was a young clone of the sheriff, except he had more hair and meaner eyes. He studied me for a second, made a noise in his throat, then took a seat opposite me. "Miss Pepper," he said. "Deputy Barker," I said. "Is Fran okay? She was pretty upset earlier." "She's fine," he replied in a near growl. "I bet you think you're smart, don't you?" "I'd say I'm okay, but I don't understand how that's relevant." "You were found crouching over the victim. What do you have to say for yourself?" "Well, I didn't murder Angela," I replied. "I don't have the motive to do that. And if you test that bottle of maple syrup for fingerprints, you'll find that mine aren't on it. I'm more than happy to offer you a DNA sample, fingerprints, and do a polygraph test." He stalled, clearly having expected resistance. "I'll tell you exactly what I heard and saw." I launched into it right away. I listed the order of the tinkling bells. "Why aren't you taking any notes?" Deputy Barker sniffed. "There are cameras in here." It appeared to be a blatant lie. This wasn't an interrogation room. "You should be taking my statement," I said, and turned in my chair. "Where's the sheriff?" "He's busy." Deputy Barker leaned in, placing an arm on the table separating us and upsetting the water bottle. I caught it and righted it. "Seriously, where is he?" "He's in contact with a detective. Detective Friedman is coming all the way down from Des Moines to deal with you." Deal with me? Had he lost his mind? Sure, this was a small town, but there were procedures for this type of thing. What are you talking about? "Let's get one thing straight," Deputy Barker said, leaning in. "I know you did it. You can tell as many stories as you like. Lie through your teeth, but I know the truth." "Am I under arrest?" I asked, opting for confrontation. Because if I am, you'd better read me my rights. No, you're not under arrest. Yet. But you watch. This new detective is going to prove that you were involved. It's only a matter of time. I got up from the table and walked to the door. Where are you going? He asked. Home. If this Detective Friedman wants to talk to me, give him my address, I said, and exited the room. They couldn't keep me here without an arrest warrant, and I had not done a thing wrong apart from reporting a crime. I expected that this detective would pay me a visit soon, at which point I'd tell him everything I'd told the deputy and offer up my DNA and fingerprints again. Anything that would help them move past me in the investigation. Anxiety filtered through my veins, and I barely managed to keep a straight face. This was bad. Not only was there a murderer on the loose in Star Lake, but I was being blamed for Angela's death. If I'd thought business had been bad before, there was no chance I'd make headway now. I exited the sheriff's office and was greeted by a shocked cry. Chapter 6. Millie! Sue streaked across the sidewalk and threw her arms around me. She squeezed me tight, enveloping me in her light jasmine perfume. Millie, I was worried sick about you. Thank goodness you're all right. My grandmother appeared beside Sue, who released me after a few minutes of fussing over how messy my hair was, and I gave them both smiles. I'm fine, I said. Everything's fine. Uh-oh, Sue said. I'll second that. Gran put an arm around my waist and hugged me. It's okay, honey. What do you mean, uh-oh? I said I was fine. Millie, please. Sue shook her head, her braids shifting gently. I grew up with 3 sisters and I'm a woman myself. You're internally freaking out, I can tell. I am not. Hush now, let's get you home. Gran guided me away, even though I was fine. As fine as an ex-cop who was now a suspected murderer could be. Gran fed me into the passenger seat of Sue's sleek black BMW, then got into the back herself. We rode back to my place with music playing and the windows open. Several townsfolk turned to stare as we drove by, some of them narrowing their eyes. Already? You've got to be kidding me. The minute we'd parked, I got out and stared at Angela's house. It was perfectly pink and quiet, just as it had been this morning. Who on earth had wanted to murder Angela? Come on, come on. Gran guided me into the yard where Waffle hopped up to greet us. Sue lifted him into her arms and we proceeded into my kitchen living room together. I'll fix a pot of coffee, Sue said, looking distinctly out of place in her gorgeous black suit and blazer in my kitchen. Gran took Waffle from her, then settled both me and my pet bunny on the 2-seater sofa. I stroked Waffle's furry head and received a playful nibble in response. I missed you too, I said, though I wasn't expecting to be home this early today. It wasn't even noon yet. All right. Gran settled herself in my only armchair, an antique that was decidedly uncomfortable, but that I loved because it had belonged to my dad. Tell us exactly what happened, from the top to the bottom of it. She touched her fingers to her fluffy white hair, studying me with great interest. I talked, and Sue and Gran made the appropriate noises at the appropriate parts in the story. Hold up, Sue said, as she handed out mugs of coffee. So you heard the bell above the door tinkle 3 times? 3 times, yeah. I had already gone over that fact several times in my mind. I wish I'd been quicker. What do you mean? Gran asked. If I'd just gone out front with my frosting-covered apron the minute I'd heard Angela entered, this wouldn't have happened. Imagine you went out there and saw it happening, Sue grimaced. Like whoever it was doing that to her. Who shoves a bottle of maple syrup in a person's mouth? Gran shuddered. I can't imagine a worse way to go. I don't think she died from that, I said. She was stabbed. Stabbed, and then the maple syrup thing happened afterward. Whoever did this despised her. To take the extra time to do something like that, it's as if they wanted to hurt her even more. That, or they were leaving a message. Sue stared at me like I'd grown an extra head. Sorry, I said. I guess you've never heard me talk this way before. Sue was aware that I'd been a police officer and given it up so that I could run my dad's cafe, but we never discussed anything that had happened while I'd been an officer. Not that there was that much to discuss. It wasn't like I'd had the chance to work cases. That was the point of the detective's test. Don't think about that. It's okay, Sue said. It's kind of morbidly fascinating, I guess. My well-put-together friend sat down beside me and sipped her coffee. Tell us more. How are you feeling? You don't need to therapize me, I said, if that's even a word. It wasn't. I was genuinely curious. Right, I said. I'm doing okay. I'm worried about the cafe, though. They're going to have to close it up to process the scene, and then there's this new detective who's going to pay me a visit. A new detective? Gran straightened in her chair. Now that is interesting. A new detective. I wonder if he's good-looking. A good point. Sue raised her mug. Stop it, you two. A woman has just died. Have you no shame? Both looked appropriately abashed. Sue, I said, can you think of anyone who might have wanted to hurt Angela? I can think of about 50 people offhand. The reply was instant. Angela wasn't the most popular person in Star Lake. At least, not when it came to anyone else. I'm sure she believed she was popular, though. A local celebrity, I said, echoing Angela's own words from the nail salon. Exactly. People were tired of how she'd been acting ever since she got back to town. Wait, I thought Angela was a local. Oh, she is, Gran said. She was born and raised here, but she left a few years ago to pursue a career in Hollywood, as a famous actress. Did she act in anything other than the cereal commercial when she was a kid? I asked. Nope, Sue and Gran replied in unison. Okay, so she came back to start a new business venture. That much I recalled. And she had an argument with her boyfriend last night. Wait, what? Her boyfriend Peter? Sue asked. That's interesting. Peter's usually so calm. I mean, he'd have to be to date her. Angela was a handful at the best of times. I heard the way you groaned at the nail salon when I called her over. We were lucky, Sue said. Usually she talks nonstop. I stroked Waffle to keep calm, trying to work through everything. A woman had been murdered right in front of my beloved Waffle station. Now my father's cafe would close, and I would be stuck as a local pariah until the cops proved my innocence, assuming they did a good job of that. I wasn't holding out hope if my experience with Deputy Barker was anything to go by. I didn't want to be one of those big city cops who frowned on the methods of my small-town counterparts. But so far, this had been a total poop show. Oh, Gran said, and put down her mug on my coffee table. What if it was the mugger, the one they're talking about in the papers? What if he killed her? Sue sucked in a breath. You might be onto something there, Celia. No, I said. That doesn't make sense. The mugger hasn't gotten violent with any of their victims yet. Why risk everything now? Why not only stab Angela, but shove a bottle of maple syrup in her mouth? Sue gulped. You're really comfortable talking like that, huh? This wasn't some random act of thievery, I continued. It's not even aggravated assault. This is a murder, and whoever did it, well, I get the feeling it was personal. Well, they should fire that new detective and hire you instead, Sue said. Gran made a tiny shake of her head in Sue's direction, then tried to act as if she hadn't. I ignored my friend's comment. Anyway, I said, it's none of my business. As long as they take my testimony and clear my name, everything will be fine." Sue and Gran exchanged a doubtful glance. Chapter 7. Pretending to be okay while there were others around, as it turned out, was far easier than actually being fine once you were alone. Waffle watched me as I paced back and forth from the living room into the kitchen and back out again. "What?" I asked. He wriggled his whiskers. "I'm fine. Everything's fine." Waffle hopped into my path, and I stopped walking to stroke him. "Look, we're going to have some supper together, you and I, and then we're going to watch a true crime documentary that will distract us from the actual crime that just happened. Tomorrow, the new detective will interview me, and then the Starlight Café will be released to me later this week, and business will continue as usual." I paused. "No, that's not right. Business will be better than ever. It will be great." Positive talk was important, even if it was slightly delusional positive talk. "Are you hungry?" I asked. I wasn't hungry in particular, but it would certainly give me something to do. Rather than pacing around worrying about the future of my father's cafe, I could stand over the sink shoving my face full of mediocre Salisbury steak while worrying about the future of my father's cafe. A knock at the door put paid to my plans. "Who's there?" I called, hand on the doorknob. A city habit. In Star Lake, people had a strange tendency to drop by whenever they liked. Knocks on the door were common. "This is Detective Friedman. I'm working with the Broome County Sheriff's Office," he said. "I'm here to talk with Millie Pepper." Ah, so the detective had arrived. That was quick. Then again, it wasn't like murders were an everyday occurrence in Star Lake. I opened the door and found a man of average height wearing a buttoned, short-sleeved shirt and a pair of jeans on my porch. A lanyard with identification hung around his neck. He made a show of displaying it to me. "Detective Friedman," he said. "Mind if I ask you a couple of questions, Miss Pepper?" "Sure, come on in." I stepped back. What was the point in saying no? It would make me look guilty, and assisting the police would help me. "Nice place," Friedman said, turning in a tight circle. "Cozy." "Or cramped," I laughed. "Whichever you prefer." Had my laugh sounded high-pitched there? Don't overanalyze. I had a problem with that. Deduction and observation got in my way. "Can I get you something to drink, Detective?" "No, I'm good. This shouldn't take too long." Detective Friedman took a seat in the uncomfortable armchair. He gave new meaning to the word average, and I wasn't being mean in that observation. Average height, weight, facial features, brown hair and eyes, tanned. He would have fit in easily with any crowd. I sat down on the sofa and lifted Waffle into my lap. "A pet bunny. That's something you don't see every day." I grinned. "His name is Waffle." The detective gave a shadow of a replying smile. "Right. So I've been told you talked to Deputy Barker earlier today. Is that correct?" "Yes. I tried to give him my statement, but he seemed, like he didn't want to take it." "Am I detecting a hint of frustration?" Friedman asked. "No." "I know you used to be a police officer," he said. "What changed?" "That's a personal question," I replied. "And I don't think it's going to add that much to your case, Detective Friedman." "You said you'd help." "My father passed. I came here to deal with his affairs, and I wound up staying." "Wound up." Friedman made a note on his pad. "All right. Tell me what happened today." I went through what I had heard and seen, giving as much detail as possible. I finished off by saying I'd be happy to provide whatever physical evidence was needed to clear me. Friedman watched me carefully after I'd finished, remaining silent. "All right," he said. "I get it. You're willing to help. That's good. And we might just end up scheduling a polygraph since you're so willing to take one." "Great. Is there anything else I can help you with, Detective?" Again, Friedman stared at me and a creeping sensation came over me. A certainty that, yes, he suspected me, even though the evidence would tell a different story, even though a good detective would have followed the trail of clues before making any deductions. "I'm sure you'll be able to help me in the coming days," Friedman said. "We'll schedule another interview soon." He got up, tucking away his notepad and pen, then headed for the exit. He paused at the front door, looking back over his shoulder. "I think you should know, Miss Pepper, that I won't stop until I solve this case." "That's good. I'm sure that it will set everyone in Star Lake at ease to hear that. We've had a problem with petty crime lately, and I want you to know that I firmly believe that cops who commit crimes deserve the harshest punishments, harshest sentences." "What exactly are you insinuating?" I got up as well. Detective Friedman wore a half sneer as he studied me. "Have a good night, Miss Pepper." Chapter 8. The following morning. "What are we going to do today, Waffle?" I stood in front of the tiny stovetop in my kitchen, adding toppings to my omelet. While I was no master chef, I'd mastered the art of making a quick, yummy breakfast. Or so I like to think. Omelets and cupcakes should be staple foods in my humble opinion. And cooking helped distract me from the rampaging fear in the pit of my stomach. I had gotten about 2 winks of sleep last night after the detective's visit, partly because I was furious that he had semi-accused me, but also because it was annoying that the cops on this case didn't seem to be investigating as I'd expected them to. Sure, there was something to be said for having a gut feeling, but to be confrontational like that during a first interview? You were more likely to get your witness to shut down than to open up. And the goal of interviews with suspects was usually a confession. I dished the omelet, ham and cheese, onto my plate. Waffle munched on lettuce and carrots in his cute bunny food bowl in the corner, occasionally pausing and staring off into space. I liked to think he was lost in deductive reasoning when he did that. Perhaps there were bunny mysteries to solve. I ate my omelet slowly, trying to savor it, but failing. What if I put the pieces together? "Oh, stop," I muttered. "You gave that up. You can't go back." Even though being a detective had been my dream. What if I did this, wound up enjoying it too much, and then realized what a huge mistake I'd made taking over my father's cafe? But if I didn't try to figure out who had murdered Angela, wouldn't I wind up losing the cafe anyway? Losing everything? I finished off the omelet, washed up, then took Waffle out into the front yard to catch some sun. "Darn thing!" The noise had come from next door. A young man with a wispy beard stood on the porch in front of Angela's pink door, jerking on the door handle and turning a key in the lock. That's the boyfriend. I'd seen him from afar, and yesterday Sue had mentioned that his name was Peter. Peter Hannigan. I watched him struggle in silence, my brow wrinkling. Tall and skinny, but strong. He had that lean muscle look about him. Was he the one who'd been arguing with Angela the night before her murder? His movements were messy, erratic, a burst of activity, then a scratching of his head, followed by a curse word. "Excuse me," I called out to him. He stopped jiggling the key in the lock and turned. "Yeah?" "Are you trying to get into Angela's house?" It was a dumb question, but it was meant to be a conversation starter. "No, I'm building a rocket to the moon. What the heck does it look like I'm doing?" "Sorry, I don't mean to pry. It's just... she passed." Peter cleared his throat, removed the key from the lock, and came down to meet me at the garden fence. "You're her neighbor?" "Yeah," I said. "We haven't officially met yet, but you're her boyfriend, right?" "I was." "Millie Pepper." I stuck out a hand. "Peter Hannigan. Man, your hair is red. Like, red as a beetroot." "Beetroot's more pink." What was it with everyone in mentioning my hair when they met me? I hadn't colored it. That was just its natural fiery hue. I didn't go around commenting on wispy beards or weird glasses or saying, Wow, you are exceptionally skinny and intrusive when meeting someone for the first time. Right. Yeah. Why are you trying to get into Angela's house? To feed her darn cat, Fluffles, he said. He's a house cat, so he doesn't leave the place without her. She gave me a key. He lifted it. A while ago, but it's not working. Oh, I'm sorry about that, I said. Maybe she changed the locks? Changed the locks? And didn't tell me about it? I don't see why she'd do that, he replied. I don't mean to be forward, but I heard an argument the night before last, I said. I assumed it was between you two. Peter's eyes, bright and the color of green snake scales, widened. I haven't visited Angela here in over a week. This place is tiny. I don't see why anyone would want to spend more time in a house that small than they'd have to. I didn't bristle at the insult. It was deserved after I'd just pried in his personal matters. Ah, okay. Then I wonder who she was arguing with. That's real strange. Did you tell the cops what you heard? Peter asked, his fist clenching around the key. Yes, but I didn't mention I thought it was you. I told them I overheard Angela arguing with someone. Good, he said. That's good, because I wasn't anywhere near here. I was at the Three Brothers Bar and Grill. You can ask anybody. Old Bill at the bar served me all night long. You just ask, okay? Okay. Peter coughed into his elbow. Besides, the last time I saw Ange was yesterday morning. I brought her a cup of coffee before I went to work. Oh, okay. And you didn't see her after that? Nope. What time did you see her? If he thought it was a weird question for me to ask, he didn't comment on it. Desperate to prove his innocence? At around 6:30 a.m., I think. A specific time. Anyway, Peter walked off without saying goodbye, heading toward the gate rather than the front of the house. Hey, Peter, I said, what about the cat? I tried. He shrugged before getting into an old Ford pickup. He drove off, leaving behind a cloud of smoke and worry. He'd leave Fluffles the cat, whom I hadn't known existed until 2 minutes ago, to starve? And why was he so keen to prove that he had an alibi from the local bar and grill? That kind of heavy-handed admission drew suspicion. Angela's pink house remained silent, the curtains drawn, beckoning without even trying. If I did this, I'd throw everything into disarray. I'd lived with guilt over not visiting my father often enough, not being invested in his life enough, that the thought of losing the cafe took my breath away. But investigating what had happened to Angela would only prove I'd missed out on my life's calling. Do it. Chapter 9. Stay here, I said to Waffle in a soft tone. He didn't take well to lecturing. He was a grown bunny, after all. Nobody could tell a grown bunny what he should or shouldn't do. Waffle's ears perked up, then flattened, and he ripped out a mouthful of grass from the front lawn. A good portent in my books. I'll be right back. I let myself out of the yard and headed over to Angela's place. Approaching the front door sent a chill down my spine. Could it be that the murderer had visited Angela here? Or just a random connection? Angela had mentioned starting a business, right? And if it hadn't been her boyfriend visiting her, and she had so few female friends, then... I tried the front door, and it was locked. People in Star Lake were surprisingly lacking in the security department. They usually left something unlocked or a spare key in an obvious place. I checked under the cutesy floral welcome mat. Nothing. A hanging potted plant was my next target. A fake plant with no dirt, and... what was that? I withdrew a key from its base. Gotcha. I unlocked the door and entered Angela's home. It was cold inside, though it was a hot summer's day, and the place smelled strongly of lemons. The walls were lined with headshots that would have suited an acting portfolio, as well as a few from her cereal commercial as a child. I shut the front door, a little sad. Angela might not have been well liked, but she would still be missed. "Fluffles," I called out. "Here, Fluffles. Here, kitty kitty." I liked cats as long as they didn't mess with Waffle. A meow came from deeper in the house. Poor Fluffles. I'd have to get hold of Angela's family members, if possible. That, or Fluffles would need to go to the local cat foster mom for care. "Fluffles, where are you?" "It's okay. My name is Millie and I'm here to help." A gorgeous, fluffy white cat meandered over to me and wound between my legs. I bent and petted her. "Hello, sweetheart. How are you? Have you been feeling lonely?" A meow in response. "Let's get you something to eat." And then I could have a look around Angela's house, see if there was anything that could help clarify who had visited the victim on the night before her death. If I wanted to solve this case, I'd need to go about it in a methodical fashion. "Here you go," I said, getting out a tin of cat food in Angela's cold kitchen. I rooted around in the drawers until I found the can opener while Fluffles paced and meowed impatiently. I dished the food into a clean plate, then put it on the floor and checked that the litter box was clean. Thankfully, it was. That left nothing but the search. I brought my phone out as I walked through the house, jotting down the timeline I'd established already. 6:30 a.m. Boyfriend Peter Hannigan sees Angela alive and well at her home. He brings her a cup of coffee. Strange, since Angela had wanted a cup when she'd entered the cafe. But then again, some people like drinking loads of coffee in the morning. Maybe one cup hadn't been enough. 7:30 a.m. Angela enters the Starlight Café and calls out to me. She dies within 5 minutes. And that was it so far. I needed to find out what had happened during that missing stretch of time. "But first," I murmured. It was time to search the place. I started with the living room and kitchen, rifling through the papers on the coffee table, checking behind the flat-screen TV, but there was nothing of note. I entered Angela's small bedroom with its double bed, covered in a frilly pink comforter and made for the dressing table pressed against the wall. I withdrew a crumpled-up piece of paper from within the bottom drawer on the right. I flattened it out. What do we have here? It was a note that had letters from magazines cut out and pasted on it. An old-school threatening letter, but the page appeared to have come from a blue, unlined notepad. "I know what you did. Pay up or everyone in Star Lake will find out the truth." I read it 3 times over. So, someone had been blackmailing Angela about a secret. But what was the secret? And was the mystery blackmailer the murderer? I took pictures of the note, back and front, then crumbled it back up again and returned it to the same drawer. I shut everything carefully and exited into the combined living room and kitchen. Fluffles had finished eating. She leapt onto the sofa's arm and bumped herself into my side, purring happily. I stroked her, going over the notes I'd made on my phone. Someone had been blackmailing Angela. Angela had left her home at 6:30 a.m., as per Peter's testimony, and arrived at the Starlight Café an hour later. Where had she been in the interim? I tapped on the screen, writing my thoughts and notes. Victim's nails were chipped, even though she had had them done the day before. Talked to ladies at the salon? Different shoes. Angela wouldn't have been caught dead in dirty sneakers. The shoe collection in Angela's closet proved that. All high heels in pinks, blacks, and creams. So why had she wound up in the cafe in such horrible kicks? Chapter 10. An hour later, I entered the nail salon and experienced that uncanny silence from the women seated at the stations getting manicures. A few of them scanned me up and down before turning back to their conversations. It was quieter today, which was maybe a good thing? I wasn't sure. I searched the place and spotted Trinity, the bunny eater, who was possibly my least favorite person in Star Lake thanks to that fact. But she was the only lead I had at this point. "Trinity," I called, waving at her. She stared at me from under thick, tinted lashes from the coffee area at the back of the room, where she'd been engaging another nail tech in conversation. Or, sharing more torturous recipes for pets. "Yeah?" Trinity replied. "If you want to make a booking, you'll need to talk to Natalie at the front desk." "No, I wanted to talk to you about something else." I went over so I wouldn't have to shout across the crowded salon. "Oh, yeah?" Trinity leaned on the counter that held the mugs, coffee pot, and cream, her eyebrows arching. She was in the mood for gossip, it seemed. She flicked her beautifully done nails at the tech she'd been talking to, and the other women huffed and left us alone. "What do you want to talk to me about?" "Angela came in the day before yesterday," I said, "when you were doing Sue's nails?" "How could I forget?" Trinity rolled her eyes. "Right. So she had her nails done then, correct?" "Yeah," Trinity replied, engaged now I was talking about a dead woman. As crass as it sounded, everyone in Star Lake was fascinated by what had happened, and I'd noticed the accusatory glances from the women in the salon. They thought I was involved. "Was that the last time you saw her? Do you know who did her nails?" "Levon did her nails," Trinity said. "The day before yesterday, but I did her nails early yesterday morning." "Wait a second. So Angela came in here yesterday morning?" I asked. "She sure did." Trinity lowered her voice, glancing toward a rather large woman doing a customer's nails nearby. "See, Levon is new. She's trying her best. Usually, Miss Betsy does Angela's nails herself, but we were slammed the day before yesterday and Miss Betsy had another client to attend to. So Levon did Angela's nails, and she, kind of messed them up. They were chipped and of really bad quality." "Then, if she fixed them, how were they a mess yet again?" Women usually looked after their nails after having them done, whether they were natural or acrylic. "Okay, so you fixed Angela's nails?" I asked. "Correct," Trinity replied. "Well, see, Angela threw a temper tantrum after Levon had finished, and since I didn't want Levon to get in trouble for it, I offered to do the nails for her, free of charge. But there wasn't time that afternoon, so I asked her to come back the next morning. Let her set the time and everything." Trinity pulled a face. "And wouldn't you believe it? Angela decided she wanted her nails done first thing in the morning. I had to get up extra early to come in here and open the whole place myself. Levon owes me big time." "What time exactly did Angela come in to see you?" I asked. "Oh, I think it was around 7? 7. Yeah, real early." Trinity checked her curls in the reflection from the coffee pot. "What shoes was she wearing?" What? Excuse me?" "Her shoes. Did you notice what shoes she was wearing?" "Honey, that's a really strange question. You know that, right?" "I know, but bear with me," I said. "Please?" "Fine, but only because you're Sue's friend." Trinity squinched her eyes up. "She was wearing high heels, pink ones, I think. I remember her coming in and the noise her heels made on the tiles, but I can't be sure of the color. I glanced at them and that was about it." "Thanks, Trinity. Just one more thing?" "Sure. I'm answering questions about a dead woman's shoes. What else you got?" "Did you notice anything strange that morning when Angela came in? Was she acting different or anything like that?" "You sound like a cop," Trinity said. "Well, I used to be one." "Shoot." "I can't. They took my gun and badge." Trinity's face went slack for a second before she burst out laughing. "That was a good one. Honey, you've got a sense of humor. I never would have expected that." "Thanks," I said. "Oh, girl, I didn't mean it like that." She patted my arm. "As for your question, well, let me think." Trinity curled her fist under her chin, tapping her long nails against her palm repeatedly. "Okay. Yeah, Angela was upset that morning, and not about the nails. Do you know what she was upset about? No, I assumed it was something to do with that boyfriend of hers. Rumors have been going around town about them. Apparently, they've been getting into a lot of fights, verbal arguments. But Pamela over there told me that she's friends with Peter's cousin, and he said that Angela was a hitter. I grimaced. Yeah, and, oh, there was another thing. She rushed out before I could finish her nails because she had another appointment to get to. Where? When? She was going to see Roxanne Mass, that woman who sells jewelry at the intersection on 5th and Bundine Boulevard. Apparently they had a meeting or something. I didn't ask what it was about. I was tired. This was great. I'd been gifted so much information about the case. Thanks, Trinity. I appreciate you talking to me about this. Sure, just don't kill me next, she said. I assume you're joking. Trinity flashed me a white-toothed grin. I left her to her gossip. I'd have bet anything she'd tell the other women about my questions, and stepped out onto the pretty paved sidewalk. I brought out my phone and started making notes. 7 a.m. Angela stops by the salon to have her nails fixed, but leaves early. She's wearing pink high heels. So something must have happened to her shoes in the half hour before she entered the cafe. Her next appointment is with Roxanne Mass, who sells jewelry. Could this be the business venture Angela had mentioned? A text blipped through on my phone before I contemplated the connection in more detail. It was from Sue. Meet me at Pigoli's for lunch? Sure. I sent the text back and checked the time. It was nearly noon. Time had flown by during my morning's activities, and I was only just getting started. Chapter 11. Pigoli's was the go-to fancy restaurant in Star Lake. During the summer months, it drew in tourists who had cash to spend, and the menu was suitably expensive as a result. But during fall and winter, the owner changed the menu out, opting to charge the locals reduced prices. It was still summer, so the prices were high, but the food was genuinely worth it here. Sue waved at me from a table near the back of the dining area. A light wood-paneled room with artsy sculptures made of wood and baby blue upholstery on the high-backed chairs. I sat down, opening the white leather menu. Wow, somebody's hungry. You don't even greet now? I'm sorry. Hi, Sue. How are you today? I'm all over the place. I can tell, Sue said, and leaned in, pressing her menu closed. And I don't blame you. Everyone's been gossiping about what happened to Angela like it's the first time anything strange or interesting has happened in Star Lake. Isn't it? Oh, heck no, Sue laughed. There was the boating incident of 2002, and then that time those high school kids set fire to the mascot costume. But I guess nothing as big as murder has happened around here. And the murder happened to have taken place in the Starlight Café. No wonder people thought I'd done it. Oh, how are you today? I'm great, she said. I mean, apart from the fact that I've been worrying about you all morning. How are you holding up? I'm fine, Sue. That should be your catchphrase. Print it on t-shirts and sell them at the Starlight Café. I'm fine. Trademark. I'm serious. You know you can be real with me, Millie. That was true. Sue had been the only person who'd approached me and tried to make friends when I'd arrived in Star Lake a year ago. I trusted her, which was a big deal for me. But I didn't like leaning on others emotionally. If I ever let on how much I was struggling with my internal landscape, it was bound to chase them off. I've been looking into things, I said, so that she'd know I was interested in the case without me having to get all talk show on it. Looking into things? Yeah, just asking a few questions. That must be weird for you, Sue said. You know, after leaving that stuff behind in Detroit? Sure. Except it didn't feel weird. It felt perfectly natural, and that was the scary part. I'm curious about what happened. I bet, Sue said. It's your livelihood at stake. Listen, if you need anything at all, you know who to talk to. Thanks, Sue. But I wasn't about to pour my heart out to her. Best friend and therapist or not. I opened the menu and our talk turned to her day-to-day and how the twins, two gorgeous girls, Jennifer and Robin, were adapting to middle school. The server came over and took our order, a piece of apple pie for me and a club sandwich for Sue. I was starving and I didn't have the usual cafe treats to snack on. So, Sue said with the air of introducing a difficult topic. Now that I thought about it, when wasn't Sue introducing a difficult topic? So? I've been thinking about what your grandmother was talking about the other day, she said, swishing her straw through her glass of pop. And I figure she's right. You do need to get out more. You two have been conspiring against me again. Conspiring for you would be the more appropriate term, Sue said, winking. And we've come up with a most elegant solution. Here it comes. Oh, stop. Sue patted my arm. We're going to the boating blowout this weekend. We can hang out all day in the sun, go boating on the lake, maybe even fishing if you're into that sort of thing, and then we'll watch the fireworks at sunset. I wriggled my nose from side to side. It will be fun, Sue continued. We're all going. Dre, the twins, me, even your grandmother's going. Come on, Millie. Well, you're acting like it's a huge deal. It hadn't been until a woman had been murdered in my cafe. Now I couldn't be sure how the locals would react to my presence, or how the boaters would react for that matter. The last thing I wanted to do was get on their bad side. I'd barely resisted joining up with the bakers on a technicality that I didn't technically bake the cupcakes in the store. I ordered them in. A blatant lie, but anything to resist being roped into a group of people. I wasn't the one of us type of girl. So you'll come, Sue said with an air of finality. Sure, I'll come. And you'll be happy? Do I have a dark cloud hanging over my head or something? I asked. Sue snorted a laugh. No, but I just don't want to feel like I'm putting you through torture. I'm happy to go. Great. The server arrived with our food shortly after. The apple pie was warm and moist, the crust buttery, and the cream on top gentle and sugary. A perfect lunchtime snack. Just the calories I needed for the next part of my investigation. After lunch, I headed off down the road and stepped into Star Lake's only stationery store. Pen and press smelled of paper and was full of color, while soft music played from a radio on the glass counter up front. An eternally bored-looking teenager with dark hair and bright pink eye makeup played on her phone behind the counter. Excuse me, I said. She tore herself away from texting. Yeah? Do you sell blue paper? What do you think? Okay, fair enough. I brought out my phone and opened it to the note. I zoomed in on a corner of the image so the threat itself would be obscured, then showed the girl the image. I'm looking for this type of paper specifically. She eyed the picture, then nodded. Sure, we got that type. How much do you want? None of it, I said. I want to know who bought this paper recently. I don't know. We don't exactly keep a record of that kind of thing. Are you the only one who works here? I asked. On Tuesdays and Wednesdays, she said. So she wouldn't have seen who bought paper like this on any of the other days, and pressing further wouldn't get me more information. Okay, thanks. Whatever. The teen returned to her phone. I let myself out of the store and stood in the sunshine, considering the street and the people in it. A few of them glared at me or muttered as they walked by. I'd hoped that time would make the residents of Star Lake more welcoming, but a murderous banner had been thrown in the works. Chapter 12. Later that afternoon. "Ready to go?" I asked, checking that Waffle's lead was firmly secured to his spangly collar. Waffle loved going for walks. It was one of his many quirks, apart from the bunny mysteries and deductive reasoning. Waffle wiggled his nose at me, hopped over, and nibbled on the side of my flip-flop. "Careful," I said. "That's not good for bunnies." I led him toward the picket gate. My plan was to head over to the intersection between 5th and Bundine Boulevard and hopefully catch up with this Roxanne Mass woman. I wasn't familiar with her. It was a small town, but I was still getting accustomed to names and faces, my attempts unaided by the lack of business in the Starlight Café. On the way, I put a call in to the local foster lady and told her about Fluffles the cat. I'd been by another time to check on the cat and give her some attention, but just a half an hour ago, a police car had arrived at Angela's home. Likely, they had a warrant to search the place. "I've already heard from Deputy Barker about poor Fluffles," Miss May said, her tone sweet. "They've asked me to come collect her this evening. Apparently, poor Angela didn't have any living relatives to care for her, and goodness knows that boyfriend isn't interested in helping the poor cat." "He's not?" I asked, pausing so that Waffle could rest in the shade of a tree on the sidewalk. I unscrewed the cap of a water bottle, got out his water bowl from my purse, and delivered some aqua into it. "Who, Peter?" Miss May asked. "No, he's a terrible human being." I raised an eyebrow. I hadn't known Miss May longer than a few months, but she'd never said a bad word about anyone in that time. To hear her call Peter a terrible human being had to mean he'd done something to leave a lasting impression. "Why do you say that, Miss May?" "Doesn't care for animals," she said. "And Angela told me that he likes to chase Fluffles around the house and tease the poor cat. She called because she was thinking of giving Fluffles up for adoption again. Can you believe that? Giving up an animal for the sake of a relationship. I'll tell you, her and Peter were made of the same sour material. Grapes or rot or whatever else you want to call it. Terrible people. Just terrible." "Are you all right, Miss May?" I watched Waffle drink water at his leisure. He was a decadent bunny, enjoyed the high life, perhaps too spoiled. But how could I say no to a fluffy face like that? "Perfectly fine, dear," she said. "Now I must run. I have to get everything prepared for when I pick up Fluffles later." "Bye." I hung up and slipped my phone into my purse. "That's interesting," I said to Waffle. "So, if Peter hated Fluffles so much, why was he at Angela's house trying to get in the other day? Was that just an excuse?" My gut said yes. Mr. Hannigan was up to something. A thought to be stored for later dissection. "Had enough?" I asked Waffle. I packed away his drinking bowl, and off we went. There were plenty of shady spots to stop, and Waffle stayed on the grass. A 5-minute walk later brought us to an intersection in the suburbs, the same one where Roxanne Mass supposedly peddled her jewelry. Except she wasn't here. "What a bust," I muttered, looking around at the houses. They were small but bigger than mine. This was the area of Star Lake populated by cheaper homes. We'll find her one way or another. Gran probably knows something. Or Sue. I turned to head back down the sidewalk, but Waffle didn't budge. "Have you had enough walking? All right, come here." I lifted Waffle into my arms, stroked his fluffy head, and walked him back the way we'd come. The prospect of an empty evening ahead didn't sit well with me. I'd be out of my mind worrying about the case, pacing. A quick text sent to my grandmother remedied that. She demanded that I come over for supper. A good thing, too, because the mediocre TV dinners in my freezer cost money, and I was barely making enough money to keep the lights on. I circled the block, enjoying the stroll, then headed back toward the house. A man stepped onto the sidewalk in front of me, heading in my direction, and my heart did a little flip. It was the tall, tan, handsome guy from the other day, the one I'd nearly knocked over. "Hi," he said as we drew closer. "That's a cute bunny." "Thanks," I replied, offering him a small smile. "His name is Waffle." "Waffle, as cute as his owner." He's flirting with me. Is he flirting with me? That silly smile remained on my lips, but no words came from between them. What was the appropriate response to what he'd said? "Thank you. I've put special attention into grooming my fur lately." "Name's Luca," he said and stuck out his hand. "And you are?" I was keenly aware of how moist my palms had grown from holding Waffle. "Sorry," I croaked. "I can't shake. Might drop him. I'd better go." Why are you so awkward? I'd never been great with men. It was so much easier to focus on a career than it was to navigate the perils of an adult relationship. My best example of a healthy relationship had been between my mother and father, before she'd abandoned us both. I made off down the sidewalk, not daring to glance back. "I didn't catch your name," Luca called. "Oh, it's Trinity." For all I knew, he could be the murderer. Better to give a fake name. Yeah, that was definitely the best option. "I'll see you around, Trinity." I didn't answer, but hurried around the corner and back to the house, my pulse thrumming like a beaten drum. Chapter 13. "There you are, sweet little boy." Gran sat with Waffle in her lap, feeding him grapes like he was a Greek god. So I wasn't entirely to blame for spoiling him. Gran did her part, but how could I tell her to stop after she'd gifted us with such a delicious meal? We sat in Gran's living room with the view of the lake, the sun setting, our bellies full of lasagna. Of course, Waffle's tummy was full of good veggies, and the grapes were a treat. I drank my pop, my feet up on Gran's favorite ottoman, taking even breaths. "Gran," I said, "do you know a woman by the name of Roxanne Mass?" "Roxanne?" Gran's tone soured. "Oh, yes, I know Roxanne. She's the one who sells jewelry on the street corner? 5th and Bundine Boulevard?" "Apparently," I said. "I've been trying to find her. So that I can talk to her about Angela. They were supposed to meet that morning." "I'd love to help you, honey, but she moves around so much with that brood of hers, I couldn't tell you where she stays now." "She moves around?" "Oh, sure. She's Star Lake's worst tenant. Folks know by now not to rent apartments or houses to her, but they still do it. I don't know if it's out of pity for her kids or what," Gran said. "I've got to admit, it's sad how those kids are being raised. A child will struggle to blossom when they don't stay put for long enough." "Are they in school?" "Yeah, they're in school, thankfully. That's one thing that's being done right. But they're a bunch of heck-raisers, or so I hear from Miss Darlene at the middle school. Poor woman has sprouted about 5 gray hairs a day since they started in her class." "I wonder where Roxanne stays." "Try the trailer park," Gran said, "or the campgrounds on the outskirts of town. Most likely you'll find her there." "I take it she's not affiliated with the boaters, butchers, or bakers?" I asked. "Definitely not. She sent them packing the minute they tried, and they listened." "A formidable woman?" "I guess you could say so," Gran said. "I'm not old-fashioned or anything, but I believe that a woman should act responsibly, especially when she has children. She's not responsible, always trying some newfangled business idea, and all because she can't hold down a job." "Why not?" I was always willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. It was clear Gran had made up her mind. "Because she steals," Gran said. "Whenever she's had a good thing going, she's managed to ruin it by stealing from her employer. Terrible example to her children. And I've offered her help before, too, and she downright refused it. Too proud, more than willing to steal for her supper, but won't accept a helping hand. I don't understand it. My grandmother, and all her dynamite-y goodness, was well-meaning. She wanted the people of Star Lake to be happy, and I knew it had to worry her that Roxanne's kids might need help that their mother couldn't afford to give them. We fell silent, Gran occasionally cooing at Waffle. He lay in her lap, the true lap of luxury, yawning and showing his massive 2 front teeth. The TV was on, though the sound was low so we could talk, and I flicked through the channels, trying to find something that would distract me sufficiently. Roxanne might be in the trailer park. I'd have to check there soon. There had to be some way to find her, and... "Do you know what else I heard?" Gran asked, settling back against the couch. "Do tell." "Brittany was mugged." "Who?" "Brittany from my book club, Millie. I swear I've told you about her before." "I'm sorry, I don't remember." Gran waved a hand. "Oh, that doesn't matter. The point is, she was mugged, and right on Baker Street, too." "Baker Street?" I said. "That's right around the corner from—" I trailed off, barely hearing my grandmother's follow-up reply. Baker Street was right around the corner from the Starlight Café. A mugger, around the corner from the cafe, on the route Angela likely walked from the intersection where Roxanne Mass supposedly peddled her jewelry. Told her that she ought to walk with someone else at that time of the night, but she wouldn't listen to me. And now look what's happened, Gran said. It's a miracle the sheriff decided to bring in outside help for the murder case. It's not like he's handled the mugging issue at all. Angela had walked through the quiet town streets, likely past the mugger's hiding spot. What if they had seen something? What if the mugger was actually the killer? Or what if the mugger was the one who had taken Angela's pretty pink heels? Then where had she gotten the sneakers from? A pair of gym shoes, maybe? Chapter 14. Early the next morning. Much to my chagrin, the Starlight Café still hadn't been released. The Broome County Sheriff's Office, in combination with Detective Friedman from the Des Moines Homicide Unit, were taking their sweet time. Technically, it took a lot of time to process a scene, and I was being a little hasty, but it hurt to walk past the cafe and see it closed, the tape across its doors. I didn't dare ask when they would release the scene and allow me back inside. Friedman would take exception to that, as would Sheriff Rogers and his deputies. I strolled past the antique store next door and down the street, turning the corner into Baker Street, my heart leaping in my chest. I'd bought a can of pepper spray and held it tightly in my clammy palm. If I ran into the mugger and they were hostile, I'd use it if necessary. But I hoped that wouldn't be the case. The mugger might have answers. They might have seen what had happened that morning. Seen the person who had to have been following Angela. I doubted this was a senseless crime. No way had some crazy person followed Angela into the cafe and murdered her just because. Baker Street was quiet. Maybe the locals were avoiding it because of the rumors, and the alleyways between cutesy boutiques were empty. If only I could find out exactly where the mugging occurred. Then I could narrow down my search area. It was futile to roam the streets searching for evidence, like looking for a needle in a haystack. Still, I dipped down alleyways searching for anything. "This is ridiculous," I muttered after about 20 minutes of rummaging through trash cans and peeking down alleyways. I wasn't going to find anything like this. There had to be a better way. My phone rang in my pocket, and I jolted, nearly dropping the pepper spray. "Hello?" I answered. "What do you think you're doing?" a woman breathed down the line. "Huh? Who is this?" "Duh, It's Sue. I'd been so focused on the case and the mugger for a second, I thought this was a threatening call. Heck, I hadn't recognized Sue's voice. Oh, hi. Wait, what are you talking about? I returned to the sidewalk, scanning the alleyway entrances as I made my way back to Main Street. You were meant to meet me at the glam boutique 5 minutes ago, girl, Sue said. Shopping, remember? Right. Sue had texted me this morning about it, but I'd totally spaced. Ugh, I'm sorry. I was apologizing a lot lately. This was the danger in getting involved in investigations. They ate up my thinking space. I'll be there in 15, okay? You better be, Sue said. I want to put you in something cute. A sundress. What's wrong with my normal clothes? I dreaded the response. You mean that one pair of faded blue jeans and black t-shirt? Hey, I have several pairs of faded blue jeans, and I'm wearing a white t-shirt today. What's wrong with that? It's practical. Practically boring? Get your butt over here now. Yes, ma'am. I hung up and slipped my phone into my pocket, loosening my grip on the pepper spray and glancing one last time down Baker Street. Nothing. And the only lead I had now was the untraceable Roxanne Mass and her jewelry. Maybe Sue would know something? She had a jewelry collection, though it was stuff that came from department stores rather than anything homemade. Remind me why we're shopping for sundresses again? I asked, turning around and checking myself out in the mirror. I was pale and milky white with freckles, a sharp juxtaposition to Sue's sleek, dark skin. She looked like a runway model in her dress, tall and slim, the cream dress speckled with yellow flowers beautifully accenting her figure. My dress was frumpy in odd places, ill-fitting on my gangly form. You look gorgeous, she said, and it's perfect for the summer's end boating blowout tomorrow. You promised you'd go with me, remember? How could I forget? But I'm much more comfortable in jeans and shirts. Why can't I just go in my usual outfit? Because you need to step out of your comfort zone once in a while. Sue turned away from the mirror and flounced over to the shopping assistant, Maisie. We'll take them. And do you have matching sandals to go with them? Oh, we sure do, Maisie said excitedly. Let me show you our selection. Sue, I don't want you to spend money on me. Don't be silly, Millie. Ha, silly Millie. It's my treat. I like being able to spoil my friends once in a while. Besides, you've had a hard week. I'd been obsessed with the case, and that had certainly helped me get over how the week had gone so far. On the positive side, at least Detective Friedman hadn't come looking for me for a follow-up interview, though I was a little worried that he hadn't yet organized the polygraph. I gave myself another judgmental glance in the mirror before heading over to join Sue at the back of the boutique. Do you know Roxanne Mass? I asked. Yeah, the one who does the jewelry? Yeah. Do you know where she lives? Sue's brow wrinkled. Last I heard, it was over on Grayson Street, but I don't think she's there anymore. Maybe the trailer park? Thanks. That was the second time I'd heard that she might be staying at the trailer park. I'd have to check that out next. Assuming Sue let me go anywhere for the rest of the day. I had the feeling she was about to declare it makeover day. She'd tried before, but now there was no excuse to say no. I didn't have a cafe to run. We're going to get our hair done after this, Sue declared. We'll have a girls' day. Fun, I managed. Chapter 15. That Friday. This is going to be fun, Gran said the minute she opened the door. It was early afternoon, and I dutifully put on the summer dress that Sue had bought for me yesterday, along with the matching sandals. My hair had been styled, and I'd put on mascara and a smear of lip gloss to accommodate my friend's wishes that I step up my game. "You look lovely, Millie." Gran hugged me by way of greeting. "Thank you, Gran. So do you." I'd left Waffle back at the house so he'd be safe from the fireworks that would be part of the festivities in the early evening. He had plenty of food, water, and shelter, but I couldn't wait to get home and relax on the couch. What's wrong with me? Why am I so antisocial? "Sue said she'd meet us down by the lake," I said. Already the sound of music and laughter drifted up from the lakeside. Stalls had been set up, and there was an open pit where a bonfire was being made under close supervision. Gran, wearing a floppy sun hat and a long bathing suit cover-up, linked her arm through mine, and we headed down toward the festivities together. The lakeside was sandy underfoot, and the distant dock was already swarming with activity as folks prepared to head out on boats or jet skis. Sue waved at me from underneath an umbrella nearby. "Yoo-hoo!" Sue and her husband Dre sat on sun chairs, their 2 girls already playing in the sand nearby, giggling as they attempted to build a sandcastle together. Dre kept a watchful eye, occasionally intervening when an argument broke out. "Ah, you've selected an excellent position," Gran said, and took a seat on one of the sun chairs underneath the umbrella. She laid out her feet, kicked off her sandals, and removed her book from her handbag. "I'll be here all day if you need me." Sue got up and grabbed me by the shoulders. "You look gorgeous." She fiddled with my hair, rearranging and fluffing. "Oh, Sue, what are you doing?" "There's someone I want you to meet," she said. My stomach dropped. Uh-oh. I should have known something like this was coming. Why else would Sue have been makeup obsessed and have bought me a new dress? "Sue, you didn't. Are you serious? Please tell me you're joking." "Come with me." Resistance was futile. Sue frog-marched me away from Dre, Gran, and the girls, and toward the boathouse and its swirl of activity. Several jetties connected to it, and there were other buildings along the lakeside, including those businesses that rented out jet skis or organized fishing and boating trips for tourists. "I can't believe you've done this," I said fiercely. "I told you I had a friend I wanted you to meet." I'd figured she'd forgotten about that. No, I'd prayed that she'd forgotten about that. I didn't need complications. "There he is," Sue waved. "Luca, over here." "Wait, Luca?" "You'll love him," Sue whispered, as the tall, tan, handsome dude I'd run into twice already this week sauntered over to us. "He's the new owner of the pizza place that's opening next month, Romano's. He's a chef and a businessman, looking for a small-town life and maybe a small-town wife." "Thanks for the dating profile," I muttered, my cheeks heating. Oh no, no, this is bad. I'd given this guy a fake name, and Sue was about to introduce me as "Luca," Sue said the minute he'd reached us. "I'd like you to meet Millie Pepper. She's my friend and the owner of the Starlight Café." "Millie?" Luca's blue eyes sparkled, sending a tumult of butterflies through my stomach. "You look just like someone I met recently." "Oh?" Sue's eyes widened. "Who?" "Trinity." "Trinity? As in Trinity from the nail salon?" Sue frowned. Nightmare. This is a living nightmare. If the sand could open now and swallow me whole, that would be great. Perfect, actually. The only thing that could possibly make this worse was if Detective Friedman or Deputy Barker showed up to accuse me of murdering Angela. "I don't think so," Luca said with a sneaky grin. "It's nice to finally meet you, Millie." I extended a hand, hopefully a peace offering. "You too." We shook on it. Sue observed the awkward silence with what I could only assume was unfettered glee. "All right," she clapped her hands. "I'll leave you two to get acquainted." I sent her a look that told her she'd pay for this later, but she merely responded with a shrug and a giggle. "I take it Sue blindsided you," Luca said. "You could say that." Luca gestured toward the sand, and we fell into an easy rhythm, walking along the shore away from the boathouse and toward the distant buildings bearing the name Binkin's Boating Tours. "Do you usually lie to people about your identity?" Luca asked. "You're not shy about confrontation." "I like to be open and honest," he said, tucking his hands into the pockets of his chinos. "I'm assuming I did something to freak you out and that's why you gave me a fake name? If that's the case, my apologies." I was taken aback by that, and I softened toward him a smidgen. "You don't have to apologize," I said. "I should do that. I shouldn't have lied. I guess you could say I'm paranoid and unaccustomed to being flirted with by handsome men on street corners." "I say that's a good thing," he laughed. "I'm painfully forward. I say things how they are. I'm new in town and I wanted to know more about you. You seemed nice. I don't usually talk to women on the street, or anywhere for that matter. It was uncomfortable for me too." His openness should have set off alarm bells, but it was surprisingly refreshing. He was the complete opposite to me. "You want to know more about me?" "If you'd care to share." I remained silent. Luca gave me a seriously attractive helping of side-eye. "What if I go first? You know my name, Luca, and you know I'm new to town. I came down from New York." "Why to Iowa? And why Star Lake?" "My grandmother lived in the state," he said. "And when I visited her as a child, I always brought home quaint small-town memories. I wanted to find a place to live that was similar to her home and create memories." There was a hint of melancholy there. "That's nice," I managed. I didn't like memories at the moment. If I'd had this conversation a few years ago, that might have been different. "What about you?" he asked. "Why are you here?" "To run my father's cafe," I said. "He can't run it himself?" I cleared my throat. "He passed." "Oh, I'm sorry for your loss," Luca said. I'm so sorry. I have some experience with loss." I opened my mouth, searching for an appropriate response, and a horrified shriek rang out from nearby. For a second, I was convinced it had come from my mouth. Wouldn't that have been the perfect way to respond to Luca's kind words? Shrieking wordlessly for no good reason? But no, it had come from the boating company's HQ. A woman emerged from within, pale as a ghost, her eyes wide and filled with terror. She collapsed on the sand. Luca let out a strangled cry and took off toward her. I followed suit. "Miss!" He dropped down beside her. "Miss, are you all right?" "Don't move her too much," I said. "She might be injured." The woman's eyelids fluttered open. She was young, probably just out of college, and she wore a uniform t-shirt with a boat printed across the front, the words Binkin's Boating Tours printed underneath it. She stammered wordlessly for a second. "Ma'am, are you all right?" I asked, snapping back to patrol officer. "Do you need medical assistance?" Luca gave me a funny look. "No, I think I passed out." She sat up with Luca's help, then pressed a hand over her mouth. "Oh, it's horrible. It's terrible." "What is?" I asked. She pointed back at the boating company building, her hand shaking. "It's Bob. He's been stabbed." Chapter 16. Bob Binkins was carried past on a stretcher, injured but alive. Stabbed. He was stabbed. The sheriff and Detective Friedman had already arrived on the scene, and the festivities, while allowed to continue at a safe distance, had died down. The boating business had been cordoned off, and people had tried gathering to watch and been forced further back. A few of those people stared at me suspiciously, like I'd somehow teleported myself into the building, stabbed Bob, and then reappeared next to Luca. Stop it. You're just stressed. It was easy to get frustrated when everything seemed to be going opposite to how I'd anticipated. Today felt like a waste. Instead of schmoozing with handsome Luca at the lake, I should have been seeking out Roxanne. I should have been in dogged pursuit of the truth. So why had I slowed down? The answer was obvious, though I didn't want to admit it. I was afraid of being good at detective work. Are you all right, honey? Gran stood beside me, only coming up to my shoulder and looped her arm around my waist. Come on, why don't we head back to my place? I'll fix you something to eat. You can have some pop and relax. I shook my head. What is it? Gran asked. What are the odds? The odds? Yeah. What are the odds that Angela was stabbed in the cafe, and now Bob Binkins has met the same fate? He's not dead, but he's been stabbed. Do we have a serial killer on our hands? Goodness, Millie, are you trying to scare me? Gran whispered. First the mugger, and now this? There's something weird going on here. 2 stabbings. They've got to be connected. But it can't be a serial killer. Bob isn't dead. Not yet. I didn't say the words out loud. They would only frighten Gran, and there was no sense in that. I spotted Detective Friedman hoofing it across the sand. Be right back, I said, and hurried after him. The detective, wearing his shoes even on the lake shore, appeared to be in high dudgeon. He scratched the back of his neck frequently, but stared directly ahead, blocking out the noise and curiosity from the onlookers behind the police line. Detective, I called and ducked under said line. It was a natural action, one I'd performed before, and I did it unthinkingly. Detective Friedman spun toward me, letting out what I could only describe as a tea kettle hiss. What the heck are you doing? Get back behind that line, Miss Pepper. I need to talk to you, I said, neither retreating nor approaching. Please, it's about Angela. And Bob. Detective Friedman equivocated. He released a grunt and came over, guiding me back behind the police line. What is it? I waited until we were far enough from potential eavesdroppers, then turned to him. I think there's a connection between Angela's murder and the attempt on Mr. Binkins's life. Detective Friedman's already sour expression went positively acrid. Excuse me? What are the odds that they were both stabbed? I asked. And in such a short amount of time. It's barely been a week, and— Let me make something clear, Miss Pepper. You are still a person of interest, and you will not peddle these inadequate, irresponsible theories to me or anyone else in this town. Do you understand me? I'm trying to help you. I don't need your help, Friedman said. You're not a detective. You're not even a cafe owner at this point. You're a suspect, plain and simple. So stay away from these cases unless you want to incriminate yourself further. It was pointless arguing. He gave me a final glare of reproval before continuing his march off toward the lakeside road. Well, that went fantastically. But I wasn't going to give up. The more I thought about it, the more my deduction made sense. I just had to prove I was right. And in doing so, that I was innocent. At this point, it was the only way to save the cafe. Chapter 17. The following morning. Was I really doing this? It was risky. If Detective Friedman happened to be at Dunport General Hospital, I was in deep trouble. But I couldn't let that stop me. If I didn't figure out what had really happened at the boating blowout, I was in deep trouble anyway, because the town's opinion of me hadn't changed, and I still hadn't gotten the cafe back. I took a breath and strode down the placid cream and blue hospital corridor, putting up a smile when I passed by a nurse and clutching the bouquet of daisies I'd brought along. The town of Dunport was about double the size of Star Lake and had the only hospital in the entire county. Naturally, that meant that Mr. Binkins, the victim of the stabbing, would be here, and hopefully the police wouldn't be. I was banking on Friedman having talked to the man last night. That was what I would have done if it was my case. I knocked once on the door to Mr. Binkins's private room. Gran told me he was wealthy enough to afford one, and waited. A soft call came from within. I entered and was met by a short, middle-aged woman with curly blonde hair. "Yes?" She eyed the bouquet in my hands mistrustfully. "Who are you?" "I'm so sorry to disturb you." My gaze moved to the bed where Mr. Binkins lay pale, his eyes closed and his hands resting at his sides. "I was hoping to talk to Mr. Binkins, but I see he's not well enough for that." "No, he's not." The woman came forward. She wore a Binkins Boating Tours t-shirt that was creased, as if she'd slept in it. "I'll take those for him." I handed them over. "Thank you," she said, and took the flowers to his bedside table. "He'll love these when he wakes up. Bob always had a soft side. Sorry, but I didn't catch your name?" "I'm Millie Pepper." The woman stiffened, her back to me. "I guess you've heard about me," I said. "The owner of the Starlight Café." "I've heard that you might be responsible for... Well, yeah, I've heard about you. Let's leave it at that." She faced me, placing a protective hand on Bob's arm. "Why did you want to talk to Bob?" I had an opportunity to tell the truth or hide it here. I hesitated. "Are you Bob's wife?" She gave a nod. Here goes nothing. "I wanted to talk to him because I wanted to find out who stabbed him," I said. "I believe that Angela Sampson's death and his attack are linked. Two stabbings so close together? It's the only thing that makes sense." "Oh. If Bob saw who attacked him, then this could blow the investigation wide open. We'd know who might have attacked Angela, and we could..." "We? Are you with the police?" "No," I said. "I'm not. I used to be a police officer, but not anymore." "So, you're trying to clear your name?" I pressed my lips together, then released them. "Yes. And I want to know who did this so I can keep Star Lake safe. Make it a safer place for everyone, I mean." Mrs. Binkins studied me for a moment, and the pressure built. The pale blue walls did nothing to disperse the tension. Mr. Binkins made a noise in his sleep, and his wife turned to him, searching him for signs of wakefulness. "I wish I could help you," she said quietly. "But I wasn't anywhere near Bob when it happened. I was untying a boat for a tour on the water. You see, I had to get everything ready for the blowout's main event. If I had been there, maybe..." Mrs. Binkins swallowed. "Maybe when Bob wakes up, he'll be able to tell you what he saw." "Will you call me if that happens, please?" I asked. "Yes, I'll call you." I gave her my number, and she entered it into her phone graciously. "I really appreciate this," I said. "I understand this must be a really difficult time for you and your family." And it was a miracle that she'd agreed to call me, not only because I wasn't a police officer and had no right to investigate the case, but because she was a boater. According to Gran, and from my limited experience in Star Lake over the past year, the boaters were famously closed off. Or rather, infamously closed off. They didn't usually mingle with folks who weren't part of their tribe, or at least not socially. "Anything to help Bob," Mrs. Binkins said. "If you don't mind, though, we're awfully tired. I'd like to be alone now. And there's so much to organize with the business. Thank goodness it's the end of summer and tourist season is nearly over." I thanked her one last time, then left the hospital room, releasing a breath. I hadn't discovered anything new, but it had been worth a shot, and I could only hope that Mrs. Binkins would call me when Bob woke up. Then again, there was an equally good chance she would call Detective Friedman instead and report me for trying to interfere. Regardless, I had another lead to follow. I was about to track down Roxanne Mass and find out exactly what she was hiding. Chapter 18. The Star Lake Trailer Park was tucked back from the lake in a wooded area that reminded me of camping trips with my father when I was a girl. The trailers were seated along a central road, perfectly spaced apart, and neatly kept for the most part. I strolled down the road, my hands in my pockets, trying to look at ease as I scanned the mobile homes for any sign of my target. I'd asked Sue what Roxanne looked like, and she described her. Average height, blonde with roots showing, and tired. Terminally tired. A single mother with 3 children tired? Who would have thought? I passed a man sitting in a deck chair in front of his trailer. He whistled at me, sharp and short. "Excuse me?" I arched an eyebrow. "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean it like that," the older gentleman said. "I just wanted to get your attention. You're not from around here." I was pretty tired of being viewed as an outsider. "I'm from Star Lake," I said, trying not to sound offensive and failing. "Nah, I meant you don't live in the trailer park, and I haven't seen you visiting anybody before. Are you lost?" "I'm looking for Roxanne Mass," I said. "The woman who sells jewelry? She is a friend of a friend." Right. Well, why didn't you say so?" The man, the top of his balding head shining in the morning sunlight, pointed toward a baby pink trailer across the road. "She lives right there. Good luck." "Good luck?" "Those kids of hers. Hard to have a conversation with them around." I thanked him, then headed toward the trailer, keenly aware of his stare burning into my back. Did he recognize me as the woman from the cafe? The one who had been found over Angela's body? Probably not, given that he'd claimed I wasn't from around here. I knocked on the pink trailer's door. A feral shriek sounded from within, followed by hysterical laughter, and then a child crying, "Choo-choo! If you don't stop, I'm going to tell Auntie Dana that you can't have any chocolates today." Roxanne's voice. I wanted to be shocked, but I figured it was difficult to parent 3 kids on one's own. Who was I to judge? All I knew about Roxanne was what Gran and Sue had told me, and I like to formulate my own opinions about people before making final decisions. The door opened, and Roxanne, blonde, petite, and thoroughly worn out, stared at me, one eyebrow arched. Her makeup was immaculately done, and she wore several bracelets along her right arm. Fake gold was my guess. "Yeah? Who are you?" "Miss Mouse?" "Yeah?" "I'm Millie Pepper," I said. "I work at the Starlight Café." "Oh." Her expression shifted incrementally. Yeah, everyone in Star Lake had heard about me now, it seemed, and not in the good way either. "I was hoping to talk to you about Angela Sampson." "Mommy, mommy, mommy, mommy!" A tiny girl appeared beside her, face streaked with what I assumed was chocolate, but might have been mud. "Can we go now? I want to go to Auntie Dana's." "Patience, Charity," Roxanne said. "Go help your brother get dressed. Now." "But mommy, mommy, mommy!" "Now!" Charity gave me a doe-eyed look before releasing her grip and rushing back inside. "As you can probably tell, I don't have time to talk about Angela or anything else. I've got 3 kids and a new job to get to, so—" Roxanne dusted off her silk blouse. "Look, it won't take long. I'm desperate here." "Desperate?" Roxanne sighed. "I can sympathize with that, but it's not my problem. Sorry." She started closing the trailer door. "The cops think I killed Angela," I said hurriedly. "And I didn't. If I can retrace her steps or figure out what happened that morning, I'll be able to clear my name. I know she was meant to meet up with you about a business opportunity." Roxanne opened the door wider. "Not with me," she said. Angela came to see me because she wanted to buy her boyfriend a gift. Peter, she wanted to give him a ring, but I didn't have any men's rings in stock, so I put an order through for her. That was before she, before someone, you know. Right. What shoes did she have on? Weird question. Heels. Angela always wore heels. Do you know what the business opportunity was about? I asked, opting for rapid-fire questioning. I heard that she was supposed to discuss a business opportunity with someone. I thought it was you. It wasn't me, and I don't know exactly who it was, but she did say that she was excited about starting a business. Roxanne rolled her eyes. I took it with a pinch of salt because Angela was, she was in the habit of bragging about stuff that didn't necessarily wind up being true, like the cereal commercial thing and her fabulous acting career. Another child's screech sounded, and she glanced back into the trailer before meeting my gaze. She mentioned that it was something to do with boating, but I have no idea exactly who she was going to meet. Boating? That helped narrow things down, especially since Bob Binkins had been stabbed in a similar manner to Angela. Now I was sure the two were connected. There were just a few missing pieces I had to put together. Yeah. One last thing, I said. Did you see which way she was headed after she met with you? Well, no. We met here at the trailer, and I didn't see which way she went once she hit the road up there. Sorry, I've got to go, she said. Good luck figuring all of this out. She shut the door in my face. Wait a second. Roxanne and Angela had met here? At the trailer park? Then why had Trinity told me that she'd been headed to the intersection where Roxanne usually sold her jewelry? Something wasn't quite adding up here, and I wasn't sure how much I could trust Roxanne. It was interesting that she'd decided to spend a couple of minutes talking to me after I'd revealed my fear that the cops thought I'd done it. Was she trying to clear her name? Give me false information? I retreated down the road, all the way to the exit of the trailer park. I hovered under a tree nearby, waiting. If Roxanne was up to something, I'd find out what it was. Chapter 19. 15 minutes passed before heels clipped onto the sidewalk. I peered from around the trunk of a tree like a stalker. I preferred to think of it as procedure, and spotted Roxanne striding down the sidewalk. No car, much like myself, but then it was a small town with gorgeous scenery. Why not walk everywhere? The kids were nowhere in sight, which had to mean that Roxanne's babysitter stayed in the trailer park. But where was this job Roxanne had to get to? Gran had mentioned that she couldn't hold down a job, so was this a jewelry sales thing? A new client? Or was she up to something more sinister? I waited until she was a sufficient distance away, then tailed her. Roxanne was self-involved, spending most of the walk into Star Lake Center on her phone, occasionally chuckling to herself and texting. We passed a couple of antique stores, the salon, and for a second I was sure we were headed toward the intersection where Roxanne peddled her jewelry. But no, she went the opposite direction and eventually entered the Pen and Press stationery store. I stopped across from it, eyes widening. The stationery store? The very same stationery store that had supplied the notepad upon which the threat was written? I brought out my phone and opened up my image gallery, finding the picture I'd taken on that note. I know what you did. Pay up or everyone in Star Lake will find out the truth. Cut out of magazines, pasted onto that specific blue paper. My heart tumbled through my chest. Roxanne had to be the one blackmailing Angela. But what about? And had it all gone wrong and she'd wound up killing Angela instead? If so, why had she done it in such an awful way? Angela's death had smacked of revenge. I watched the stationery store and the movements within. Roxanne had taken up a spot behind the counter, and the woman who'd been manning the desk before her left the store without saying goodbye. No love lost between them? I waited until the coast was clear, then headed across the road and entered the store. The bell tinkled overhead, and the familiar smell of fresh paper enveloped me. Roxanne looked up from her phone and did a double-take. "What the—" "Hi, Roxanne," I said and went over, my phone clasped in my palm. "We need to talk." "Are you following me?" I placed the phone on the countertop and pointed at the screen where the image of the threatening note was on full display. "Care to explain?" Roxanne paled, gaze flickering from the image to my face. "Where did you— How?" "That doesn't matter," I said. "I suggest you start talking unless you want me to take this information to the cops." "You can't prove anything." "I can prove that you work in the same stationery store that stocks this paper. I can prove that you lied about where you met Angela on the morning of her death." Not technically true, but a good scare tactic. Not being a police officer gave me a little legroom when it came to the truth. "I'm sure the cops would be interested to hear those two facts." Roxanne's bottom lip trembled. She drew herself up straight, but the calm front crumbled. "You don't understand." "Then help me understand." "I don't want to have to report this, Roxanne," I said. "But I will." "Don't." "Tell me why you were threatening Angela." Roxanne's bottom lip trembling grew worse. She inhaled sharply. "Money," she said at last. "I needed money. I still need money. I have 3 kids, no husband, and everyone in this darn town treats me like I've got the plague or something." "What did you mean by this, though? You know what she did? What did Angela do?" "She hit someone with her car," Roxanne said, "and nearly killed them. A tourist from out of town. I was the only one who knew about it because I happened to see it happen. Angela promised to pay me if I didn't tell anyone about it. The tourist didn't know it was Angela who hit her because she passed out after the crash, and Angela drove off. A hit and run. I was going to tell the police who did it, but then I figured Angela had to have had loads of money from her commercials, so why not take advantage of the situation?" Roxanne's cheeks colored. "My kids need food." "So that's what the meeting was about?" I asked. "With Angela? The morning of her murder?" "Yeah. She paid me the first half of what she promised, then left. She said she had a meeting with one of the boaters." "And that's it?" I asked. "You didn't follow her? See where she went? Maybe murder her in my cafe and try to frame me for the crime?" "No, I swear. I mean, you can ask anyone who drove past the intersection that morning. I was selling jewelry as usual." "Do the police know that?" "Yeah. I told Sheriff Rogers and that deputy of his. I haven't talked to Detective Friedman yet." She hadn't talked to the detective yet. That was alarming. How did Friedman expect to solve the case if he didn't talk to those who'd last been in contact with Angela? Unless he was tunneling on me. "You should tell Friedman about this," I said. "I need the money for my kids. I can't give it up." "If you don't tell Friedman, then I'm going to." Roxanne gulped. I hated to take the hard line here, but the detective needed all the facts. How else would Angela's killer be brought to justice? Chapter 20. The following morning, bright and early. It felt like ages since I'd last opened the Starlight Café. I met Francesca at the front doors at 7 a.m. sharp, nervous for the day to come. Would I have to out Roxanne to the police after yesterday's discovery? No amount of stroking Waffle's furry ears had calmed me down this morning. "Are you okay, Millie?" Fran asked. "You're kind of pale." "I'm great." I opened the front doors of the cafe, and we entered. Fran headed for the back to start cleaning up. We wouldn't be serving any customers today, though I doubted anyone in Star Lake would be dropping by after all the recent rumors and allegations. Today was cleaning day, cleaning up after the police had done their job. Thankfully, they'd done cleaning of their own, but I wanted to make sure that the Starlight Café was spotless. I stopped at the glass counters, empty of treats, and glanced over at the Waffle station. Poor Angela. It seemed like years ago that she'd been murdered. So much had happened, from the boating blowout to my investigation into her death. Really, it had been little over a week. No use crying over spilled milk. I set to work washing the floors, pausing once in a while to check the front of the store and the sidewalk. Where had Angela come from? She had to have stopped on the way to the cafe because she'd been wearing the scuffed sneakers here, but Roxanne had seen her with heels on. The bell above the cafe door tinkled, and Gran entered. "Good morning, dear," she said. "How are you holding up?" "I'm doing great, Gran." My grandmother gave me a look that said she knew otherwise. Today, she wore her favorite art overalls, and they were spotted in colorful paint. "Are you really?" Gran took a seat on a puffy bar stool in front of the counter. "I don't suppose you're serving coffee today." "I'm not serving anything," I replied, "but I can make an exception for you." And I was in dire need of a coffee myself. I fixed 3, one for me, one for Gran, and one for Francesca. After I'd taken Franz through to the kitchen, I returned to the counter and stood behind it, sipping from my mug. "You don't want to sit down?" Gran asked. "No, call it nervous energy, but I'd prefer to stand." "I know you've been working hard on this investigation, Millie," Gran said, reaching out to stroke the back of my hand. "This must be difficult for you." I swallowed the emotion in my throat. Between losing Dad and giving up on my dream of being a detective, there wasn't much space left for emotion. But the threat of losing the cafe was just as painful. "When I'm not busy with work," I said, "I feel anxious." It was tough to admit that, even to Gran. I figured it was far better to pretend everything was okay and keep on moving. Fake it until you make it? This case has kept me busy at least. "You've been through a lot, dear," Gran replied. "This will pass. You'll find yourself again. Find your groove." "Well, you've been through a lot too, and I don't see you freaking out." "That's because I spend most of my time freaking out while I paint. Have you seen my overalls?" I laughed. Gran took a sip of her coffee. "So, what can you tell me? What have you discovered about Angela's death?" I withdrew my phone from my pocket and started going over my notes. Well, so far, I know that Peter and Angela may have had a rocky relationship, and that he wanted to get into her house the day after her death, even though he didn't have her key. Did she change her locks beforehand? Okay, so Peter's still a suspect. Yeah, and I know that Roxanne was blackmailing Angela. Oh, really? I explained what I'd discovered, and my Gran's eyebrows climbed at the new information. "That's quite something," she said. "I told you that Roxanne is no good. She's happy to threaten and cheat to get money, but she won't accept anyone's offered help." I wondered if it was the victim of the near-death accident, the hit-and-run, that may have come back to town to take revenge on Angela. But that doesn't make too much sense to me if this person was a tourist, and if they didn't know it was Angela in the first place. "Yes, they would have reported her." "Exactly," I said. "I'm puzzled about 2 things. Angela's strange shoes, and her dealings with the boaters. Apparently, this business venture had something to do with the boating industry. Or so Roxanne says. And it's safe to say I can take everything she says with a healthy dose of skepticism." "Well, the boaters wouldn't take kindly to Angela moving in on their turf," Gran said with a sip of coffee. She wasn't one of them, and they're infamously hostile to the other factions in town, and even people who aren't a part of any faction. I nodded, staring out of the glass front doors of the cafe, wiggling my nose. What is it, Millie? I can't help but think that Bob Binkins' stabbing is related to Angela's. And now that there's a connection between Angela and the boaters, you think it was one of them? It makes sense to me, I said, but the evidence has to stack up correctly. And I was fresh out of evidence. So far, I'd proven that Roxanne Mass wasn't the nicest person in Star Lake, and that Peter potentially hated cats. And that was about it. What are you going to do? Gran asked. Chapter 21. I yawned as I approached my small blue house in the twilight. 2 days had passed since I'd reopened the Starlight Café, hoping that the locals would be drawn in by my father's mishmash aesthetic, the scents of freshly roasted coffee bean, and intrigue about what had happened to Angela. So far, my only customers had been Gran and Sue, and while I loved the quality time, it was just confirmation that the cafe had a huge battle ahead. And so did I, assuming I could clear my name before Detective Friedman decided to bring me in for questioning. I opened the picket gate and entered. Waffle thumped over to me from his bunny hutch, and I bent and scooped him into my arms. Hello, sweetheart. I stroked his furry ears and nuzzled the top of his fluffy head. I missed you. Waffle gave me an affectionate nibble and lick on the hand. Yes, did you have a good day? I asked. Lots of carrots, grass, and sunshine? Another lick nibble. Let's go inside and have supper. It was nice to enter my cozy home after a long day of nothingness at the cafe. I prepared a quick TV dinner for myself and put out some bunny food for Waffle before heading into the living room and plopping down on my sofa. I'd been racking my brain over the case for the past few days, and I had come to a conclusion. I needed to know more about the boaters in town. If Angela had been going into business in that sector, that was a motive for one of the boaters to attack her, especially with tourist season winding down and the sheer number of boating tour companies that service the lake. They didn't need more competition. The TV dinner, a Salisbury steak, was less than appetizing, so I placed it on the coffee table and brought out my phone. My fingers hovered over the screen. Binkins Boating Tours. The search brought up the website for the boating tour business as the first search result. I opened the webpage and scanned it, reading the jovial copy. At Binkins Boating Tours, we care about giving you the best vacation experience possible. Enjoy the sun and water on our guided tour of the lake, or hire us to take you out fishing. Whatever your boating and touring needs, we're happy to help. The picture on the About Us section showed 5 staff members in total, with Bob and his wife Marie arm in arm. Everyone wore bright smiles and smart uniform t-shirts with the Binkins Boating Tours logo on the breast pocket. Why had Bob been attacked? Who had been out to get him? And how was it connected to Angela's death? I opened another browser tab. Maybe Bob's social media profile would give me a clue. Bob Binkins. The search results popped up and I inhaled sharply. The first article bore a harrowing headline. Local businessman dies of injuries in hospital. Murderer still at large. Bob had succumbed to his injuries? That was terrible news, and it elevated the investigation into what had happened to him. Could Friedman really handle 2 cases at once? I had to find out what had happened at the lake, and how Angela and Bob's cases might be connected. After a night spent tossing and turning, I woke up bright and early, gulped down some coffee, gave Waffle breakfast and a kiss, and then set off. Bob's death, sad and terrible as it was, had lit a fire under my booty. I had become increasingly convinced that the two deaths were linked. The coincidences were too great, and if I had learned anything, it was that in investigations there were no coincidences. I took a leisurely stroll through town and down to the lakeside, glancing up at my grandmother's cabin with a smile. It was early, but the circular attic windows were open. She was up there painting again. I'd stopped by after I'd spoken to Mrs. Binkins. Assuming Mrs. Binkins was down at the shore rather than grieving her husband. Either way, someone would know where the Binkinses lived. The lakeside was quiet compared to the day of the big blowout, but there was still activity. Folks out on the water or moving around near the boathouse and jetties. Binkins' boating tour's glass front doors were closed, but the lights were on inside, revealing sea green walls, white chairs, pictures of the lake and boats on the walls, and a figure moved around within. Marie Binkins herself. I knocked on the glass, and Marie jumped, her curly blonde hair bobbing. She spotted me and pressed a hand to her chest, letting out a breath, then came over and opened up. "You scared me," she said quietly. Her eyes were bloodshot. "Is there something I can help you with?" She didn't recognize me? Then again, she'd been through a lot over this past week. "I was hoping to talk to you." "We're close today, I'm sorry." "No, I meant I was hoping to talk to you about what happened to Bob," I said. "You don't remember me, but we spoke at the hospital? I was the one asking about Bob's attacker." "Oh, right. Tilly?" "Millie," I said. "Millie Pepper. I just wanted to say that I'm really sorry for your loss, Mrs. Binkins." Marie clung to the door as if it would help keep her upright. She didn't open it or invite me in. "Thank you. I was hoping that you might help me figure out what happened. You see, I've heard that Angela Sampson might have had dealings with people in the boating community, or that she was interested in opening up a boating tour company in competition with—" "What has any of this got to do with Bob?" Marie asked, closing the door more so there was only a sliver of a gap with her peeking out at me. "Well, if Angela was opening up a business in direct competition with the boaters, then it stands to reason that one of those boaters might have taken exception to that. And if that's the case, then that same person might be responsible for Bob's passing." Marie shook her head slowly, as if moving it through molasses. "You've got some nerve coming out here. All you care about is yourself and your stupid little cafe. You don't actually care about the people in this town. Not about Angela or Bob. No wonder nobody likes you." She slammed the door shut in my face. Ouch. She might have had a point. My reason for pressing for answers was selfish in one respect, but I really did want to find out who'd taken 2 lives. I wanted to help protect the community, too. I knocked on the door one last time, but Marie ignored me, exiting into the back office. So much for that lead. Nobody in town would talk to me, which made my job that much harder. My phone rang in the pocket of my shorts, and I extracted it, grateful for the distraction. Sue's number flashed on the screen. "Hey, Sue," I said. "How are—" "You won't believe what just happened to me." Chapter 22. "Sue? What happened?" I trudged away from Binkin's boating tours, white sand spraying into my sandals and gritting underfoot. Not ideal, but I'd been so caught up in my investigations I'd forgotten to remove my shoes. "I'm on my way to the sheriff's office," Sue said. "I was just mugged." "Oh my gosh, are you okay?" "I mean, I just got mugged, so not really." Sue's voice trembled, but there was an edge of excitement to her tone. "I can't believe it, Millie. I was just walking down the street, and this person stepped up behind me and stuck a gun against my back. She said hand over my wallet or she'd make me wish I had." "Wait, it was a woman?" I asked. The mugger was a woman? Yes, with a raspy voice. Sue, this is going to seem like a strange question, but where did this happen exactly? It was just around the corner from the Starlight Café, on Stack Street, between the butcher's place and Mello's Antiques. Do you need anything from me? I asked, hightailing it across the sand, my mind focused on the new target. I had to be crazy to be doing this, but I was fresh out of Leeds, and this mugger might be the missing link I'd been looking for all along. No, honey, I'm okay. I'm just about to arrive at the sheriff's office. I'm sure he'll help me with this. And if he doesn't, well, he's in for a world of hurt. Heck had no fury like Sue scorned. I'm sure he'll help you, Sue. Gotta go, she said. I'm almost there. Be safe. Oh, I'm trying. Trust me. Sue hung up. I took off running across the sand, kicking it up with every step. I had to get there before the police did. And without a car, well, that wouldn't exactly be easy. This is a new level of crazy. I've truly reached the limit. But what was the alternative? Sit around and wait for Detective Friedman to solve the case while my cafe slowly sank into debt? Worse debt? I turned the corner into Stack Street and started for the exact spot where it had happened. The alleyway between the butcher's and antique store was dark, and my pulse raced. I took a few breaths, forcing myself to approach this as I would have any dangerous situation. My hand straight to my hip, but of course there was no gun to unholster, and I wouldn't have done so unless the situation escalated to such a point that force was necessary. I stepped into the alleyway and started up it. Hello? I called out. Is anyone down here? Silence. Come on. You've got to be here. A rustling came from behind a dumpster at the end of the alleyway. I know you're there, I said. Come on out and let's talk. That's all I want, just to talk. A head poked around the edge of the dumpster, and a flash of recognition nearly overwhelmed me. It was her, the homeless woman from the beginning of the week, complete with tan skin and ire-filled stare. You, she said. I remember you. You're the coffee lady. She shifted her hand, and I caught a glimpse of the dull gray object clasped in it. A length of pipe. Was that what she'd pressed against Sue's back? I'd have wagered that the end of it felt similar to the muzzle of a gun to a civilian. Millie, I said, pressing a hand to my chest. What's your name? Does it matter? Yes. I know why you're here, she said, rising to her feet, tottering slightly on glittery pink high heels. High heels? Where would she have gotten? It came to me instantly. Angela. This was what had happened to Angela's shoes. They had been taken by the mugger. My guess had been correct. Angela must have had a spare pair of old gym shoes in her car that she'd slipped on after the mugging. But why not report it to the police before coming to my cafe? Report me to the cops. I won't go down without a fight. Wait, I said. That's not why I'm here. The mugger raised a skeptical eyebrow. Really, it's not. Obviously, you mugging people isn't ideal and you need to stop, but... Oh, yeah? You know what else isn't ideal? Being spat on and disrespected. Losing everything and then having people who think they're better than you make comments or avoid you like you're going to give them a disease. I'd like to see you try that on for size. What's your name? I asked. Samantha, she replied, but most folks call me Manny. Manny, I said. You just mugged my friend. Oh, sorry. Surprisingly, she did sound sorry. I'm not trying to hurt anybody. I'm just doing what I got to do to survive. I take a little from everybody, whether they give it to me freely or not. Like you. I wouldn't mug you, lady. You gave me coffee freely. You treated me with respect. Other people don't do that. I nodded. Here's the thing, Manny. One of the people you mugged was murdered literally a few minutes afterward. That got her attention. She flung both hands upward and held them there, the folds of her oversized sweatshirt dropping to her elbows. Hey, man, I didn't do anything like that. You've got to believe me. I'm not the murdering type. I'm not accusing you. I believe you might have seen the person who did it. This would have been on Tuesday last week. Angela was tall with platinum blonde hair. She was wearing those heels, is my guess. Oh, yeah, sure, I remember her. She screeched like a barn owl when I took the shoes. Did you see anyone else? Anyone following her? This is the super important part. Please try to remember. If you can remember this, you'll help put the killer behind bars. I was hedging my bets on Manny wanting to redeem herself. She frowned, running dirty fingernails over her forehead. I remember coming back into the alleyway afterward to try on the shoes. I saw movement. What? I think I saw who was following her. She was short. A woman? My heart beat faster. Was this the final piece of evidence? The final clue? Yeah, short woman, probably in her 40s. I don't know, she had short, curly hair, blonde. The news sent my brain into overdrive. I knew exactly who Manny was talking about. Marie Binkins, I breathed. But why? Why would she do something like this? You know who she is? The mugger asked excitedly. I helped? Yeah, a lot. But I'm afraid you're going to have to tell the police about this. Manny paled. Just think about it, okay? This might be something that helps you in court rather than hurts you. They're going to catch you anyway, Manny. She didn't answer, and I didn't have time to stick around. I started for the alleyway's mouth. Wait, Millie, wait. Manny ran up beside me. Here, take this. She shoved a square piece of leather into my hands. A wallet. Give it back to your friend and tell her I'm sorry. Chapter 23. Later that evening. I studied my reflection in the mirror over my dressing table, pressing my hands flat against my black t-shirt. Not exactly fashionable, but it will have to work. I couldn't rely on Manny to tell Detective Friedman the truth about what had happened. I needed to find the evidence myself. And the only way to do that was to find out what Marie's motive had been. Why would she have stabbed not only Angela, but her husband as well? Did it have something to do with the business Angela had wanted to start? There was only one spectacularly illegal way to find out. I said goodbye to my snoozing Waffle before setting my jaw and leaving the house. 20 minutes later, I was picking my way between the trees alongside the lake, grasping my phone in one sweaty hand. Binkin's boating tours was closed, as they should be at 9 p.m. on a fall evening, but the lights were on inside. You can do this. I wasn't used to breaking into places and searching them without a warrant. There was strict protocol that came with being a police officer. Citizens had Fourth Amendment rights that protected them from unreasonable searches. That was what warrants were for. I was about to go against all of that in the quest for evidence, and it went against every bone in my body and every instinct I had developed over the past 10 years. Just do it. Stop hesitating. Technically, I couldn't be held accountable for my actions as a police officer anymore, just as an ordinary breaking and entering citizen. This wasn't an unwarranted search by a law enforcement official anymore. Just a plain old misdemeanor. Maximum 1 year if I got caught. Minimum shame for the rest of my life. You have to stop. I circled the building and searched for points of entry. A window at the back was open a crack. I wedged my fingers between it and the sill and opened that crack wider. Finally, I hoisted myself up and into a small bathroom. The lights were off in here, but the moonlight guided me. I caught my reflection in the mirror over the sink and grimaced at it. What are you doing, you crazy person? I entered the main area of the place, found the light switch, and cut the lights. The last thing I needed was some helpful passerby spotting me and calling the cops. I wagered that if the back window was open, the alarm was probably off. Now all I needed was anything that connected the Binkins with Angela. But what? I moved through to the office, a small room at the back that didn't have any windows. Inside, I shut the door and switched on the flashlight on my phone. The blue light arced over the gray filing cabinets, the wooden desk pushed into one corner, and the computer atop it. More pictures of boats on the walls, and an image of Bob and Marie grinning at the camera, their arms around each other. The computer was my best bet, so I sat down in front of it and switched it on. It whirred to life and showed me a plain blue desktop. I navigated to the email icon, a neat little envelope, right away. People were usually pretty messy about their inboxes, or maybe that was just me. I typed Angela into the search bar and hit return. 2 email threads popped up. Bingo. Angela and the Binkins were linked after all? I opened the first email thread. Sure, Bob, I guess that works. I'll add it to my calendar. Look, I don't want to step on anyone's toes. I understand that the boaters might not take it too well, but with your support, I believe they'll see that I mean business. Thanks, Angela. On Thursday, September 16th, 2021, at 11:58 a.m., Bob Binkins wrote, Angela, it's a big ask, all right, but I know what it's like starting a new business. I believe in family, friends and family, so I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I can help you. How does September 21st suit you? Around 9 a.m.? I know that's early, but that's the best I can do. We'll have to keep this between us, though. If word gets out that you're muscling in on our territory, things could get complicated fast. Stay well, Bob. On Thursday, September 16th, 2021, at 9:32 a.m., Angela Sampson wrote, Dear Mr. Binkins, I hope this email finds you well. I understand that when it comes to starting a tourism venture in Star Lake, you're the man to talk to. I'm interested in starting my own company, one that will provide life jackets to tourists who go on your tours and to other businesses on the lake. I was hoping to talk to you about it, perhaps get your advice. While I may not be a part of the boaters, I know I'll make a good addition to the business sphere at the lake. Warmest of regards, Angela Sampson. Parentheses, you might know me from the Tasty Bites commercial, 99. I blinked. Wow. Okay, talk about information. So, Angela had wanted to embark on a business venture with Bob, as expected. And she'd planned on meeting Bob after she'd come to the cafe. I clicked backward and opened the other email thread. Friday, September 17th, 2021 at 7:03 a.m., Bob Binkins wrote, Stay away from Bob, floozy. I know what you are after, and you'll never have him, he's mine. If you thinky you're hoeing to be with him, you are wrong. That had to be an email from Marie. Terrible grammar, typos and all. Was her motive that simple? She'd thought that Angela and Bob were having an affair, so she'd killed them both? My guess was that Bob had found out the truth, and Marie had had no choice. But a guess didn't stand up in court. Quickly, I forwarded both emails to the sheriff's office. A clattering from the other side of the office door sent a spike of anxiety through my midriff. I shut off the computer right away, turned off my flashlight, and dipped underneath the desk. The office door opened, and the light clicked on. A pair of feet, clad in flip-flops, entered the office. I didn't dare breathe or move too suddenly. Marie had come to the office. But why? What was she trying to do? I peered past her, out into the now well-lit main area of the building. Past that, 2 headlights shined in the parking area out front. Marie's car was running. Was she getting out of Star Lake? Come on, she muttered, standing in front of the desk as she waited for the PC to boot up. She clicked away frantically. My heart skipped a beat. If she checked the email, she'd see that someone had forwarded both threads to Angela to the sheriff's office. What the? Now, quick, before she runs. I reached out and grabbed her ankles and pulled hard. Marie screamed and fell backwards, making contact with the tiles hard. I scrambled on top of her and pinned her arms above her head, using all my force. But it wasn't necessary. Marie had hit her head on the way down and was unconscious. Or was she? I checked her pulse and exhaled. Alive, just knocked out. Quick as I could, I searched the office for something to tie her legs and feet. The cord from the blinds would have to do. I cut it off with a pair of scissors from the stationery holder on the desk, then used the cord to tie up Marie. All that was left now was to call Friedman. The case was solved. My name was clear, assuming the detective didn't throw me in jail for meddling. Chapter 24. 1 week later. Can you believe that? Gran tapped the front of the newspaper, the Starlight Gazette. They couldn't even catch the woman with all that testimony. You've got to admit that The Mugger Who Got Away is a catchy headline for a newspaper article, Sue replied, taking a sip of coffee. It's a slap in the face. If anything, the newspaper should be focusing on how fantastic Millie was during all of this. Gran beamed at me. A local hero. My cheeks heated. Come on, Gran, that's not true. And I didn't want anyone talking too much about my contribution. I'd managed to play off me catching Marie with a shameful lie, namely that I'd been out walking when I'd heard a commotion and encountered her. Of course, Marie would dispute that, but the evidence was overwhelming. She had murdered both Bob and Angela, maple syrup and all. The bell over the door in my father's cafe tinkled, and 2 women entered. They stopped just inside, looking around awkwardly, and I could barely believe my eyes. Customers? Here? Could it be true? Good morning, I said. May I help you, ladies? Would you like a table? A waffle? Waffle? Well, sure. I gestured to the waffle station. We make them fresh and you get to top them with whatever you like. Oh, that sounds great, the woman on the right said. Her friend, hair in tight curls against her scalp, shook her head. Just coffee for me. I'm not a sweet tooth like Gertrude. You can pick any table you like, I said easily, trying not to come off desperate. The more natural I acted, the more likely they'd be to return. I really wanted to establish a cozy, comforting atmosphere to match my father's strange aesthetic. The women took seats, and I swept out from behind the counter, bringing them their menus. You said you wanted a coffee? I turned to the customer with the curly hair. Any type in particular? I've got lattes, cappuccinos, and more. Just an Americano for me, the woman replied, then glanced around the place. I like that you didn't change the decor. Frank would have been happy about that. Thank you. I like it too. I showed Gertrude how the waffle station worked, then put an order in for a waffle from a very excitable Francesca. Our first real customers. Had the bad luck finally lifted? I could scarcely believe it. Big couple of weeks, I said once I'd rejoined Gran and Sue. My first customers and my name cleared. Cleared by you and not the police, Gran said. I can't fathom how you did it, Millie. I know you were a police officer, but to go out of your way and connect the dots like that? I'm impressed. I smiled at Sue. It felt like good luck, honestly. Whatever it was, you did it. You should be proud of yourself. Gran patted my arm. Well, it doesn't matter. I'll never have to do that again. I finished preparing the coffee for my customer and took it over. It was wonderful to serve someone, and I couldn't help the extra pep in my step as a result. And things only got better from there. The bell above the glass door tinkled so many times after that, I lost count. People were in the cafe. They wanted food. They wanted service. They wanted to enjoy themselves. By closing time, I was thoroughly exhausted and equally happy. People had enjoyed the food and atmosphere. If the Starlight Café continued having days like this... "Good night, Millie," Fran waved as she headed out the door. "Can't wait for tomorrow." "Me neither," I replied. I headed into the kitchen to hang up my apron, and the ring of the bell drew my attention. Alarm bells went off. What if this was another customer who wound up getting killed in the cafe? That's highly unlikely. Regardless, I rushed out into the cafe and nearly ran right into a man. "Whoa, you've got to stop running into me like that." Luca, the stunningly handsome newcomer in Star Lake, smiled at me, his blue eyes twinkling. "Hi, by the way." "Hello," I swallowed. "How are you?" "I'm good. Sorry our date got cut short at the boating blowout. I would have called you, but I didn't have your number, and Sue wasn't giving it out." "Oh?" "Yeah, so how are you?" I hesitated, then broke out into a smile. "I'm good, actually. Great. It was a good day." "I'm glad to hear it." Tension drifted between us. "I was hoping to catch you here," he said. "Would you like to have coffee with me sometime? Finish our chat from the lake the other day?" Did I want to do that? Luca was well-meaning and sweet, but there was so much else for me to focus on right now. There was the cafe, mourning my father, and then my uncertainty about personal relationships, especially with men. "Luca," I said, "I like you. You're sweet and nice and easy on the eyes." He ran his fingers through his hair and chuckled. "I like where you're going with this." "But I'm just not ready to date yet. So thanks for asking, but I'll have to take a rain check. For now." Luca's smile faltered for only a second. "Sure, I get that." "Thanks," I said. "Maybe another time." "I'll see you around." He strolled from the cafe, easy as can be, and lifted a hand. "See you," I called back, then folded my arms to my chest, biting my bottom lip and holding back my joy. Today had been a good day. Gran was happy. Waffle was waiting at home. Sue had gone back to her loving family and would stop by in the morning. And the cafe? It was going to be a success. I just had to work hard enough, believe enough, respect my father's legacy enough. So much had happened in the span of a few weeks, but for the first time since I'd moved to Star Lake, I was finally starting to feel at home.
This has been Maple Drizzle Murder by Rosie A. Point, narrated by Abigail Reno. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more cozy audiobooks.